And we are back. Irish Breakdown fans, Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It's Friday, and that used to mean something different than it means now. Now it means it's prediction time. That is Ryan Roberts over there. We switched on us. I got to get that sucker back over there. That's Ryan Roberts. I'm Brian Driscoll. And we are going to talk about Notre Dame versus Cal. We're going to make predictions. We're going to talk about some keys to victory. And then we're going to talk about what we need to see from Notre Dame on Saturday besides just a win that makes us think they've turned the corner. Because Ryan and I were discussing this. There are things Notre Dame could do that will win that will make me think nothing has changed. Mm-hmm. And it's not winning means things have changed. There needs to be things that we need to see discernibly that let us know, like, okay, this team has genuinely turned the corner. And so we'll discuss a lot of those with you. And then at the end, there's about 6 games that are really interesting this weekend in college football that we're going to talk about. You know, we're not going to necessarily make predictions for all of them. Some of them we have predictions on the irishbreakdown.com. You can go to irishbreakdown.com and see those predictions. But we're going to talk a little bit about the Miami Texas A&M game, which is fascinating to me. BYU, Oregon, Penn State, Auburn's a really interesting game. Oklahoma, Nebraska, Fresno, USC, and Michigan State and Washington. And I'll explain to you why I'm super ticked at Sean Davis during that segment of the show, because somebody stole my upset pick this week. So I got to pick a different one. And so that's why I haven't put the upset picks out. So we try to everybody get different ones. And so Sean sent me his last night, and I was like, dang it, I should have claimed mine first. But we'll get into that. We'll get into that as the show rolls on. So first up, Ryan, we're going to talk Notre Dame Cal, because that is the most important game of the weekend for us. This is Ryan, I don't know what to think about this game. I really don't, man. I have no clue what Notre Dame is going to do defensively. I have no clue what they're going to do offensively. I have no clue what the fire of this team is going to be or not, what the focus of this team is going to be or not. I just – there's so many unknowns right now about this football team. Mm-hmm. That I just don't know what to expect on Saturday. But what I do know is this team needs to start turning the corner, because outside of Ohio State, you have not really hit the meat of your schedule yet. And if you think Marshall and Cal are tough to beat, wait till the next 3 opponents that Notre Dame has to face. And so the biggest thing is we need to see Notre Dame. They don't have to come out and beat Cal 50-6. They don't. We just need to see things to say, okay, you can build on that, and that's going to help you get going in all 3 phases of the game. Biggest thing, yes, a W is important, but beyond a W, we need to see that this team is starting to turn a corner this weekend.
So, Brian, in my opinion, if Notre Dame plays to their absolute best ability and we start to get a little bit of a turnaround, this game should never be in question, in my opinion, right? Like, that's what I want to see. Is if Notre Dame wins this football game, I don't want it to ever, even if it ends up being a close game, I don't want it to ever be a game where you're just like, well, that was not even, that was a close game. Like, that was a back and forth. I want this to be a game where you're just like, Notre Dame had that the whole time. And it was obvious who the better, more talented team on the field was during that contest. So that's what I am looking forward to seeing. I would describe this team right now as enigmatic right now, right? Like, they're a little bit of an enigma as we currently sit, Brian. Like, I think that I still have hope that they can hit near their ceiling. And if they can, I think they can be a good football team. But also there's potential that on Saturday we're going to see a bad football team, right? Like it's so volatile to what they could potentially do this weekend. But for me, this one can't ever be a contest, right? Like if you really are turning the corner, Notre Dame needs to come into this game from start to finish, and you need to be like, yep, Notre Dame's a better football team than that team. Like, no matter what the score ends up being, and obviously Notre Dame needs to win, but whether it is a 7-point game or a 20-point win, whatever that it comes in between, Notre Dame needs to outclass Cal for me to really feel like, hey, they're trending in the right direction. There's some growth this week.
Even if it's not a blowout, we need to see those things, because I mean, look, they could have a blowout where you just say, like, they had one side of the ball stepped up and forced some turnovers, or just Cal made some dumb mistakes or some breaks go their way. We've seen that stuff before. They could have a convincing win, and I could still look at this and say, not a lot has changed, really. Man, they hit a couple throws here and there, like we talked about last week. If Tyler Buckner hits that throw at the end of the half, and if he hits that throw on 3rd and 8 in the 4th quarter, Notre Dame wins by 10 plus points, but does that really change anything about what's going on with this football team just because they had a couple plays? No, the overall struggles, it would have just been like you just had better dudes than they had, and that's why you won the game. It doesn't fix anything in regard to getting ready to go win the rest of your games, and that's the key for me.
And we've been there too many times before in the past, right? Like, not even talking about this coaching staff, talking about the previous coaching staff. Like, there has been too many games to even recollect on where Notre Dame didn't play very well. But the bottom line was that they were just more talented, and they end up more out-talenting people. Like, I don't want to see a team that gets out-talented, Brian. Like, I know that they're a more talented team than Cal Berkeley is. Like, I want them to be able to enter and leave this game with the unquestioned that they were the most ready and better football team from start to finish than Cal. That's what my standards are. Even though Notre Dame's sitting here at 0-2 and just had a terrible loss to Marshall last week, I still have those standards. And I know that Marcus Freeman still has those standards, right? So, like, that's what I want to see this week is that you need to outclass this team, in my opinion. Like, there should be, especially with so much adversity hitting you, man. Like, this is when you show character.
If you don't now, then it's just not
When's
there.
it going to happen? It's not going to happen, probably.
No, this team just doesn't have it. I mean, if you don't show it this weekend, I mean, like we've said, look, this is not the time to overreact and panic and fans overreact and bench this guy, bench that guy, play this guy, put all the freshmen in. Like, it's like, all right, come on, folks, like pump the brakes on that. But if you see the same lack of energy and emotion this week that we saw last week, then it's like, okay, there's a character problem here, and we can either continue to go down this path and hope that the veteran guys fix it, or we can say we're going to fix it now ourselves, and we're going to play the younger guys that still want to be out there and play with passion. So I hope we don't have to get to that point. I hope we'll see the guys like Jarrett Patterson and Isaiah Foskey and Jason Adamiola look in the mirror and say, hey, it's my job to go out there and fix this thing. And then you hope that the coaching staff doesn't have the biggest thing for me is I just want to know that the coaching staff doesn't have let's just keep doing what we're doing and just we'll get better at it kind of thing, because that's not the answer. And the reason I keep thinking that is because that's what we've seen the previous 12 years. I had hoped that was gone, but we're going to find out. And we're going to find out because there's still enough people around the program that are from the previous staff that you got to wonder, like, is that just kind of part of that culture that needs to be eradicated or not? And I hope that the answer to that is or not, that they eradicate it themselves and come out this week with a little bit of an attitude and a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. That's really what I need to see this weekend, Ryan.
Everyone needs this game, man. Like, the coaching staff needs this game. The fans need this game. The players need this game. Everybody, and the people that write about it every day need this game, man. Like, everyone needs this. They do. This is and especially for obviously the coaching staff and the players. Like, they need this game, man. This is about to be a fractured confidence at this point, Brian. Like, you just got beat by a team that is far and below your caliber. They are an inferior football team. You just played against Marshall. They beat you. You're sitting here now with a fractured sense of confidence. And again, adversity shows character.
Right.
And I think that my biggest thing is that one thing that we were loving the whole offseason, we were like, wow, Marcus Freeman and this staff, confidence and competition. Like, those are the two things that were kind of exuded throughout the players, how they talked, press conferences, everything. And if you lose this game, like, it's going to fracture the confidence completely at this point. As if 0-2 isn't a bad enough of start. If you lose to back-to-back teams that are just not as good as you, and that is terrible for this team morale. So they need to win this football game. Everyone needs to win this football game.
Yeah,
and this would be a little gift for everyone.
The only reason that they would lose this game, Ryan, is if this team just doesn't have that character. I mean, because if the Marshall game, if the Marshall game doesn't get it fixed for you mentally, then what's losing to Cal going to do for you? It just means you don't have it. You know what I mean? And like I said, your character will be exposed this weekend, one or the other. You're going to say, like, you know what, these kids, look, they didn't get off to a good start. Some things didn't go their way, but they all rallied together. They came together as a team. They came together as players. They came together as coaches. Say, hey, look, we got to fix this, right? And they get it done. And that's what we're gonna find. And it's going to be about, can Coach Freeman push the right buttons? Can Tommy Rees say, hey, look, what we've been doing isn't working. Let's figure out, what we need to do, whether it's personnel changes, whether it's how you go about your business and practice changes, whether it's how you're putting your game plan together to make it a little bit more complementary.
Mhm.
and make sure it works together and you're building to different things. Those things are all on the table, and we're going to find out this week what kind of answers they came from. And, so we talked about, Ryan, what do we want to see this weekend? I
Mhm.
think for me, before we even get into the specific keys to success, so what do we want to see this weekend? Number one, this team comes out and plays with fire. Number one,
Yes.
I want to see a higher level of execution, because a higher level of execution means you're starting to push the right buttons in practice, that you're going to start doing a better job. I want to see the stars start to play like stars, right? And I can somewhat excuse Jarrett Patterson not playing like a star because he's not 100%. He just flat out not.
Mhm.
And so I don't expect him to look like 100% healthy, informed Jarrett Patterson. But what we can't see are the mental mistakes, because your mind is not, you didn't hurt your mind this offseason. You hurt your foot. Okay.
Right.
And so make sure you're seeing that. But with Foskey, Jason Adamiola, Cam Hart, Maris Luafau, Brandon Joseph, who was great against Ohio State, didn't play great against Marshall. All of them have to say, hey, look, this is up to us, right? Michael Mayer on offense. Blake Fisher, right? Incredibly talented kid. I know he's young. I know this is putting a lot on him, but dude, you got to go out there and play like you're the baddest dude on the block, because in reality, you are.
Mhm.
Believe in yourself to do that, and then just go play, man. And then the veterans got to show leadership. You can't be having mental mistakes and technique and assignment mistakes from your sixth-year senior guard, right? Your All-American tight end can't be a negative as a blocker, right? Like, I mean, that's pride. That's those are the things that are missing. And so that's what I need to see from this football team.
I want to see looseness, man. Like, I want to see, we've talked about this a ton. We think that there is some inconsistencies from a just understanding what's expected of you, right? Comfort in the scheme. And those things can make you tight. And I feel like right now, this is a very mechanical team over the first two games, right? Like, there's some good to it because you're in the right spots most of the time, but I just don't see a team that's letting loose, right? Like, I don't see athletes being athletes.
Yeah.
I don't see that right now, right? So for me, it's, can we get this team loose? Can we get them ready to compete? And we can let them go, man. Like, at the end of the day, I want to see, and I know we're not getting super in depth yet, but I want to see 4 down and just Al Golden says, just go, man. Just go.
Hey,
Just be
Isaiah, see
yourself.
that number 13? Get him.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
That's
Forget
it,
all
man.
this other stuff. Get them. Let me see that your one move works first before I take you to move number 2. Right? And so, those are the things that I need to see. I want to see Jason Adamiola, man. Stop with all the, like, just go play, man. Go make plays. Right? It's all of that. I want to see this team play with fire. I want to see this team execute better. I want to see noticeable adjustments. I don't want to see just a better execution of what you did last week, because better executing what you did last week can beat Cal, but it doesn't prepare you to go win the next week, the next week, the next week, the next week, and the next week, right? Just means you out-talented a team that you flat out should out-talent. Cal's got some good players. Cal is ascending. If they can keep recruiting like they're recruiting right now the last 2 years, they're ascending. They're well coached. They've added some really good offensive skill players, and J. Michael Sturdivant and Maven Anderson and Jaden Ott and guys like that. Good. Keep doing that, right? But they're not now a team that should beat Notre Dame unless Notre Dame plays bad, right? Notre Dame should be able to out-talent them, and so it can't just be that you out-talented them and you played with fire. It needs to be you do that, but I need to see some discernible changes in how the linebackers are playing, which tells me they're changing how they're preparing them during the week of practice. I need to see the wide receivers playing with more speed. Not that they don't have speed, that they're playing with that speed, which tells me that they're changing how they're installing the practice aspect of it. They're changing how the route combinations are going. I need to see some of the younger players. I need to see, if I don't see Eli Raridan and Tobias Merriweather this year, like this week, like in quarter numero uno, I'm going to lose it in the postgame show. I'm just telling you, I don't win or lose. I'm going to lose it in the postgame show, because maybe you can beat Cal without them, but you're going to need them moving forward. And now's the time to get them going. And there's been nothing that you've seen from the veterans should make you trust them more than the young players, right? Because what you have seen from them is, this dude can't block. This dude's not fighting for the ball. This guy has no idea how to win on routes, right? So, I mean, dude, the freshmen can do that, but they're more talented and they're bigger. So play them. And so if they do play them, that's a sign to me that they figured out we just got to let loose, man. We got to stop trying to be perfect and all this stuff and just put our dudes out on the field and give them an opportunity to go make plays. I need to see Chris Tyree being more of a focal point of the offense, because if they're not, then it tells me they haven't learned anything. They've cleaned up some stuff, and so they beat Cal. But as I've always said, Ryan, and it doesn't look, my belief doesn't change whether you're 0-2 or 2-0. And this is what makes Nick Saban so great. It's not about the end result. It has to be about the process. Because if it's just about the end result, then you convince yourself that 10-3 with really close losses to Clemson and Stanford, and then a bowl loss against Ohio State where we're missing a lot of players. If you're just about the results, then you look at that and say, no, we're good. We're just going to play a little harder and coach a little better, which is word for word what Brian Kelly said after the 2015 season. So you don't fire your defensive coordinator that everybody on the planet, except apparently you and him, knows is not getting the job done. You don't make any staff changes to your strength program, which everybody around the program was complaining about going into that season, because you just look at the result. It's got to be about the process. And if you just look at the result, and the result is a W this weekend, then it doesn't necessarily mean the process is setting you up to then go have success in future weeks. And so to me, that's why it's not just about getting the win. It's about realizing that there are flaws within how you're going about your business, whether it be personnel, whether it be practice, whether it be play calling, play design, game plan design, play calling on both sides of the ball. There are changes that need to be made. And if you're not willing to make those and all you do is clean up some stuff, then it tells me this team didn't learn their lesson. And that's my biggest fear coming out of this game. And on the opposite, the thing I'm most hoping that we see fixed this weekend.
On your excerpt there on the process, Brian, I mean, this is slightly a hyperbolic statement, but it's one that I actually do subscribe to a lot. I was always taught, and I try to teach the players that I coached as well, that you do all your thinking during practice every day of the week, right? When it comes to the game, that should be programmed at that point, right? Like, you should be so comfortable in what your responsibility is in whatever scheme you're working in, whatever play you're running, whatever, that you just go, man. Like, again, like we both have said it already, you need to play loose, man. You need to play free, and not free of out of structure, out of the system, doing your own thing. Freelancing, free is in you're comfortable and you're able to accentuate and show off your athleticism. Because like the biggest thing that I always come back to, Notre Dame has talent, man, and they have speed, and they have a lot of really good football players on this team. Have they showed it enough in the first 2 games of the season? Absolutely not. But again, I would say that there's a process issue over the first 2 games. And it's not even shade at the coaching staff. For whatever reason, the team did not play loose, in my opinion, during the first 2 weeks. So that is continuing to emphasize this. That's what I want to see this game. There are little parts, and that comes into everything. All my overlying keys that I want to see, whether that is getting a wide receiver in space, getting Chris Tyree on the edge, letting your linebackers get downhill and go. Like, all those things come back to one simple thing. Go, man. Be loose, be explosive, be athletic. The reason that you are in South Bend, Indiana is because when you were playing football, you showed us that you had this athletic upside and you are a really good football player, right? Right now, they're playing too much like they don't want to make mistakes. Forget about mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Make them fast ones. That's the end-all, be-all for me. Is I want to see if there is mistakes, they need to be fast ones. They need to be aggressive ones. I feel like people are afraid to make mistakes right now.
Let's get into some of the keys to victory for Notre Dame in this game, Ryan. And let's begin with the side that has the most to prove this weekend, and that's the offensive line. And there are certain things that are obvious, like don't turn it over 3 times, don't throw a pick 6, play hard. Like there's the generic things that are assumed. We're not going to get into those. Those things need to happen. But specific keys, right? That's what we do here. We're trying to get into the nitty-gritty. I think the first thing I need to see that's going to tell me that this team has made changes, but also is a key to success against Cal, specifically against Cal, is we need to see this team be more willing to spread out and to move more. Not just the little quick motions that they're doing, but like move more, like, hey, be 11 personnel, but then do 4, 5, 6 different things out of 11. Don't run a million plays, run a million formations, right? That's the kind of thing is if you feel the need to do something a million times, and I'm being hyperbolic here, then make it be formations, not plays. Right. And if we see some of that, I think that's a key, because as we've talked about before, Cal is 2 different defenses. There's the defense from here, like from the edge to the edge, and it goes all the way back. So from their ends to their inside backers to their safeties, they're a long, big football team, right? And that's what they use to shut down the run. Then there's what they have on the perimeter, their corners and their nickel. Big, physical, smart, sound up here. Short, little, tiny, physical, smart on the perimeter. They're smart and physical and sound everywhere, but they're really small outside. Cal wants you to go condense. They want you to feel the need to go 12 personnel in order to get the run game going. And so if Notre Dame is willing to spread the field out, use its speed advantage on the perimeter, then that's going to give them an opportunity to have success, because it's going to force Cal into some sub packages that maybe they'd rather not get into. And their sub packages means they take out an outside linebacker who's 6'3", 245, and they put in a 5'10" nickel corner. That plays into Notre Dame's hands. Okay. So to me, that's the biggest thing for me, is a shift in identity from a formational and a personnel standpoint that then is followed by using that schematically to get Cal going left, right. And now that may seem counterintuitive to what people think Notre Dame is, but as Ryan and I talked about yesterday, for this game especially, and to get this team going, Notre Dame needs to kind of reverse engineer its offense a little bit. It's been a run team that's going to set up the pass. This week against Cal, simply put, you're not good enough to do that, in my opinion. You need to do it kind of opposite. Use the perimeter, use your speed, use the pass game to then open up opportunities for your run game. And that's where I think this team needs to go. It's like key number 1. That's a key to success for this offense.
From a general sense, the 3-4 defense was created to stop the inside run, right? Like that's the biggest thing. So we know how Cal wants to win this game. They want to be tough. They want to be physical. They want to stop the run, like you said, Brian. Like they want to pitch tents inside. Like Correa, the nose tackle, 91, wants to stay in his 2 gaps, right? Like he wants to play down the middle and have A gap to A gap. That's where he wants to play. Carlton, the defensive lineman that kind of mixes in with all these other guys, right? Like he wants to stay in his gap. These linebackers, they want to feast inside. Number 10 and Sermon, they want to play inside out. They want to dominate the interior of this offensive line and stop the run. That's what they want to do. So with anything, this is offensively or defensively, you want to make the opposition uncomfortable, right? You want to make them do things that they are not accustomed to doing. Chasing to the perimeter is what this team does not want to do. Working to the outside, having to defend bigger receivers with your smaller defensive backs. Those are things that you do not want to do. So I agree. I think that the rushing number in this game, I think, is going to tell a lot about this game, Brian, because if Notre Dame is able to run the ball, that tells me that they started out in this game and they said, okay, we need to soften this interior up a little bit. How do we do that? Let's get outside, maybe a jet occasionally, right? Some outside zone. We'll throw some RPO and just hit some screens out there. Yeah. So you want to soften the edges here because you think that you can win there, right? Like I'm not just softening just to soften. I'm softening because I think I can win out there, and then I'm going to make the defense uncomfortable. And as they get more and more comfortable, they have to overcompensate to start stopping the outside runs, stop everything to the perimeter. That's when you get gashes up the middle because now you have to overcompensate and you are now taking guys out of the box or at least structurally moving them out a little bit so that you do stop that outside perimeter run. So that is the biggest thing for me is that I think that the rushing total is going to be very indicative because this is a staunch run defense. If they're able to run the football, that tells me they softened it early and then they're able to gash in the middle. I don't think that Notre Dame's going to be able to. And this is not a fault of Notre Dame necessarily because most teams would be like this. I don't think most teams can just go play Cal and just say like, hey, we're running inside zone all day. That's all we're doing, right? Like we're running inside power. That's it. That's all we're going to do. That's not how you're effective against Cal. You know where they're weakest at, attack where the weaknesses are, make them uncomfortable, and that's how you soften the interior of this defense. And I think that that's going to be the biggest indicator, to your point, of a victory is how well Notre Dame's able to run the football this week.
Now, if Notre Dame comes out and runs inside zone and duo and just blows Cal off the ball and they're the line that everybody thought they are, fine. I mean, okay, that's cool, but I don't see that going from what we've seen the first 2 weeks to that in week 3. I think you can eventually get to that, but I feel like just assuming that's going to happen to me just doesn't it's just not reality in my view. I just have a hard time saying that the light just goes on to that degree. And so there needs to be some smart planning in regard to what this team is going to do schematically. So I think that's a big key. I think a couple keys to success, Ryan, obviously there's simple things like don't do stupid things, right? Don't false start on 3rd and 3. Don't have a 22-yard gain brought back by a silly, lazy block in the back penalty, right? Like dumb things like that can't happen. And then beyond that, they need to hit a deep shot early.
Yes.
And I don't care how, if it's off an RPO, if it's designed, if it's a sluggo, a wheel, but just a straight go. I do not care how it happens, but they've got to hit a deep shot early. Cal's not an easy team to hit deep shots on based on how they normally play. I just don't feel they're going to normally play like they normally play. I think they're going to bring another guy down in the box and say, you have shown no ability to throw the ball down the field, whether it's the quarterback not being able to hit open guys, whether it's the protection, whatever the case may be, you haven't shown you can hit that. They're going to need to hit a deep shot or two early to soften Cal up. That's what we refer to there. And then I want to see some space. And what Tommy Rees has not done a good job of so far this year, and it's something that I think that he believes in, is getting the ball in space. There's different ways to do that. Everybody thinks that space is just throwing now screens and bubble screens and stuff like that. And that's true. That's part of it. Sure. But there's also other ways where you're using levels concepts, where you're doing things to where in space isn't always quick. Space can be take the top off of Braden Lindsey, have Lorenzo Styles run an under route, or have Michael Mayer run an under route to run right across the linebacker's face, Michael, get them to come down on you. And then bam, Lorenzo Styles is coming over the middle, catching and running at 15. There's different things like that you can also do to get guys in space, but you've got to use your alignment. That's where the spread comes from. You've got to use some of your movement. You've got to use your route combinations and such that, look, the horizontal stretch stuff isn't working. Your receivers aren't good enough route runners yet to know how to win on a stop route. They have no concept. They're just running right into a guy, right? And then turning around and boxing out. Like, that's not going to work. So until they learn that, you've got to do some things. You've got to get them moving. Mm-hmm. And that's how you can use those concepts. So that's why you need more levels, more verticals, more things like that. More post-snap switching is something I would also do a lot of. Some pre-snap movement where you can get some stacks is something I would do more of, which allows you to kind of get off the press. It allows guys to get moving before the snap. It allows you to do more stuff with that post-snap stuff like we talked about. Because a post-snap switch, when you're just in your normal alignment, is certainly something you can do, but it's a little bit harder to do. It takes a little bit longer to do. You stack those guys, and all of a sudden you can do a lot of different things. You can do, guy go vertical quick underneath route. There's a lot of stuff you can do. I want to see the creativity in that regard, not running a million different plays, but that's where I want to see some of the creativity. I think if we can see some of that stuff, that's a way that you can help Drew Pine get into an early rhythm. Yeah, because that's my biggest concern. Drew looked not good yesterday. And he did not look good in the practices that my staff was at, right? He did not look good in the spring, not just in the spring game, which I don't care about, but in the practices. Drew's in a funk. You've got to get that kid some early momentum. You've got to find some early success for him. So some one-on-one deep shots, some things where you're using your combinations to get guys free in space where he has a simple 1-2 read. And use your backs more, and I don't know if this is the week to run a million screens. We've called for him the last couple of weeks. This is a pretty disciplined defense. So the running back screens is what I'm referring to. There's perimeter screens that I like, but the running back, the slow developing slip screen, I don't know if this is the week for that because their linebackers are pretty smart. They may sniff it out, but there are certainly things that you can do in the screen game beyond just that I think can be effective. And if you're going to run a running back screen, it needs to be a little bit more creative than just a check, slip, just, run a reverse action off of that or something and have run a reverse already, do something to get their eye discipline. That's a big thing for Cal, Ryan, is you've got to get their eye discipline off. You know, you
Yes.
got to get them thinking this instead of this, because if Cal's able to play downhill all game, you're playing right into their hands, into their hands.
That's because their strongest position group on it as a team, in my opinion, is their linebackers, right? Like their linebackers are really good football players. Like Sermon and number 10 are good football players. They really are, and they're big kids, right? Sermon's 6'2", 240. Number 10 is 6'3", 255. Like they're big inside backers. They don't want to play in space, Brian. Like that, your biggest thing, right, is that you want to manipulate and create a little bit, and that goes from a lot of different layers, right? Like for Drew Pine, get some easy completions, man. Like that's easy stuff, right? Because you're manufacturing space and you're manufacturing leverage, right? So in that instances, you're creating some easy throws for Drew. Perfect. You're also manipulating eyes of the second level defenders, those two inside linebackers that I'm talking about. I want them to be extremely uncomfortable because, to your point, if they are just triggering and getting downhill all day, it's an easy football game for them, man. It's an easy game. But if you start, hey, let's work the seam a little bit and we'll bring somebody coming underneath and have to really manipulate their eyes, or maybe we're trading, tight ends moving over to one side or the other, there's some motion coming across, and you're doing some switching from a post-snap perspective, that's manipulating eye discipline, right? And this is a disciplined team, so you need to do things that get their clock moving, right? Because they have seen, I mean, they're very, very savvy football players, but you can manipulate them. And I want to see it because, again, if there's hope for Tommy Rees, it's that this week he comes into this football game and he knows, hey, their second level is really good. It's probably their best unit. I have better athletes than they have in space. Let's create some space then. Right. Let's get them uncomfortable. I want Jackson Sermon chasing a screen outside. I want him chasing to the perimeter. I want a post-snap switch where you get a guy coming across the middle and now he has to redirect in space. Make this second level uncomfortable. And you do that by creating space. Manufacture, create, and capitalize. That's the biggest thing for me this week.
I want to interrupt this breakdown just a little bit. We got a comment here from Irish One. Said he's in a hospital today. Hospital, probably their poor Wi-Fi. He asked for prayers from me and the IB family. He said he went in for a CT scan yesterday for hernia, and they found cancer, and they want to start chemo soon. So, my man, you absolutely have our prayers, buddy. We are with you in spirit. We'll certainly be praying for my wife and I. We will definitely add you to our prayer list for sure. I know there's a lot of people in this chat will do the same thing, man. But we're here for you, to get your mind off of things anytime. Also to offer prayer for you. But definitely keep us in the loop, man. There's no doubt. So we're definitely praying for you. Definitely praying for you. That's couldn't imagine. That's a scary stuff. But just keep battling, fight, and know that your IB Nation family is right here with you, man. No question about it. So Ryan, let's move on to the defense. Those are always hard transitions to make. When like real life kicks you in the face a little bit. But that's the fight that I know we're going to see from Irish One. But let's transition to the defense here for these keys to victory, Ryan. I think the biggest one is we are going to get a little bit simple here. And the first key is dominate up front. Yes. Dominate up front in the run game. Dominate up front in the pass game. The reality is Jack Plummer, if he is sitting in the pocket, comfortable with time to throw, he has a big-time arm, and he will hurt you. And they have speed on the perimeter. They have some cats that can make plays. At running back, as Ryan has said multiple times this week, Jade Knott, their freshman running back. It's amazing that Cal has freshmen smart enough to play early on and be successful. I wish Notre Dame could recruit some guys like that, I say sarcastically.
Well, I mean, Cal's a great academic institution, and Notre Dame isn't, right?
Right. So, Notre Dame's getting kids that can barely read and write, apparently.
Yeah, apparently.
I say incredibly sarcastically. But, sorry, I had to throw that saltiness out there. But Jade Knott is a weapon in the pass game. He's going to present a threat. Their tight end, Latu, is a kid that is a threat in the pass game. And we've talked about the receivers a lot. All three of their starting receivers are weapons. And they have another kid, Monroe Young, I think, comes off the bench. And he has made some plays this year, too. So they've got weapons. Where they are not good is in the trenches. They are much more athletic on the perimeter at running back than Marshall was. Mm-hmm. They are not as good in the trenches as Marshall was, and you need to dominate that. So the combination of them not being good there and you need to play better, and a breakout game is needed from this defensive line. If the defensive line doesn't have a breakout game now, I got to start asking major questions about what Al Washington is doing, because you're now 3 games in. You can chalk the first game up to, Ohio State had really long, talented offensive tackles, which, one of them is. The other one I'm still not sold on.
Mm-hmm.
And then Marshall had really long, well-coached offensive tackles. Okay, sure. There's no excuse in this one because they're not long, they're not athletic, they're not good. Like Cal doesn't have a single offensive lineman that I would consider good. Okay. Their center's okay. One of their tackles would be good if he was a guard, as you mentioned yesterday. If their left tackle was playing guard, he'd be good, but he's not a good left tackle. There's no excuse not to dominate in the trenches. And also, it's very important because you cannot let this – because if Cal has early success moving the ball, it is going to boost their – because, look, Notre Dame is a wounded animal right now, and no one's afraid of them right now. And if Cal comes in here and hits a couple shots and moves the ball, gets some early points on the board, their confidence skyrockets, and then Notre Dame's plummets. And you can't allow that to happen. And it's harder to get a guy out of rhythm once he's in it than it is to just get him out of rhythm early. Once a guy gets into a role, it can be challenging to get him out of that. You can't let Jack Plummer get into that role. So to me, that's the biggest thing is you've got to dominate up front. That everything else that we're going to talk about is built on dominating up front.
On paper, it's your biggest advantage in this football game is that your defensive line is a lot better than their offensive line in theory, right? We had to take theory and have to make it practical. Like that's the biggest thing from your defensive perspective. I'll say this, Brian, but with how the defensive line has played the first 2 weeks, we talked all preseason about there's going to be a lot of probably offensive lines that are going to slide protection to Isaiah Foskey and get some double teams on him occasionally. I think that they're going to look at this defensive line and say, like, hey, no one's killing it right now. So, like, we can do some one-on-one blocking, and I think that Isaiah Foskey is going to have a chance to go one-on-one with some of these tackles. I think Jason Amalolo is going to have a chance to get one-on-one against some of these guards, and they need to capitalize, man. Point blank. This is the most point blank it'll ever be. They are better football players than what Cal is trotting out there at offensive line. Your good players need to be good football players and need to be dominant football players in this game because that is your biggest advantage. And when you have an advantage, you need to take it. You need to capitalize on it. Like that is all it comes down to in this game. You have the chance to physically dominate this team and physically dominate in getting pressure on Jack Plummer, making him uncomfortable, getting him on the grounds, forcing bad incompletions and bad decisions. And the run game, right? I mean, they've number 28. That's an okay little runner, but Jay Knott's the guy, in my opinion. That's the guy that scares me.
He's their hammer kind of guy, right?
Yes. Right. Yeah, he's the bigger back.
Jay Knott's more, right? I think it's who that is.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
He's technically their starter.
Technically, yeah.
But he's not their leading ball carrier.
If you watch the UNLV game or the game before, he starts the game and then Jay Knott comes in and finishes.
That's kind of a smart way to handle a freshman, right? Don't put all the pressure on of starting him, but maybe start somebody else, but then build him into it and get him some reps, get him some touches. Imagine that. Imagine that's crazy philosophy.
I didn't know that was allowed. I thought it was outlawed around these parts, but it's for me. That's the biggest thing though, is that their offensive line is not good, and if Cal wins the football game, it won't change the fact that their offensive line is not good. I mean, it's not, right? And if Notre Dame is as good as we think they can be on the defensive line, we've been talking all offseason about how Isaiah Foskey could be a first-round pick. Jason Amalolo might be one of the most underrated players in all of college football from the defensive tackle position. They haven't played like it right now. They haven't. This is the game where you come out and you say, I have pride, and I'm going to make some plays because I am super talented, but I haven't shown it the first 2 weeks. Let's get it, guys. Let's get it.
I almost just kicked BK 99 problems. BK one out. I almost kicked him out, Ryan. He said he got me. He got me good. He started off with school is too hard at Notre Dame for freshmen, and freshmen have to adjust. And then he said, unlike at Cal Berkeley.
Yes.
That's when I started to lose it. And then he said sarcastically, so you saved yourself, my friend. But as far as that's the old excuse that we've heard from past years, which you can't really use when you're playing a team that, a school like Cal Berkeley and they have freshmen playing. For them.
Here's another good one for you. 99 Problems also said patience. We have to build trust. Meriwether will play in a couple years.
Yeah. And then they'll complain about how he doesn't have a lot of experience, anyway, we'll see how that one goes. Ryan, I think defensively too, there's more than just the D-line, I think, making plays. I think they have to protect against the deep ball. I think this is a Cal team that you want to try to go on drives because they will make mistakes. They'll drop a ball. They're a young receiving core all around. They'll make mistakes. They'll run a bad route. You'll eventually beat the line. Protecting against the big plays is huge. You cannot let them get big plays. You can't let Sturdivant get over the top and beat you. Now, I'm not saying play 8 yards off and just let them nickel and dime you up and down the field. I would like to see them kind of take away some of the quick stuff in different ways, but you also don't want to just come up and play cover one and expose your corners to just a bunch of deep shots by J. Michael Sturdivant and Jeremiah Hunter, right?
Yes.
So especially Sturdivant, who can fly, and he's long. He's like 6'2" plus.
Yep. So
you have to be careful. They are different than Marshall. Last week it should have been come up, take everything quick away. Here it's a little bit different. You need to make sure you're not just exposing them to shot after shot after shot, because Plummer has a cannon, unlike the kid from last week. And he took 2 bomb shots on the first drive against UNLV last week.
Sure did.
And missed on one and then hit on the next one, and the second one was, that was a good the coverage on the second one that they completed was better than the one that he missed. The one that he missed, Sturdivant was open.
Yeah, that was Hunter like fading to the sideline, right? Over the shoulder.
He just dropped it over his outside shoulder, like inside the 5-yard line. Just dimed it.
That was a great throw, man. It was a great throw.
But then he missed a wide open Sturdivant on the first one, right?
To your point, it was like the third play of the game. Sturdivant put that kid in the blender, man. Like it was over with. Like he had 5 yards.
There was no move. He just ran right by him.
He's very fast, and he showed his speed off there. And that's been my biggest worry this whole week, Brian, is that like, hey, man, that J. Michael Sturdivant kid, that kid can run, man. Like that kid can run. I know Notre Dame's got some defensive backs that can run too. Like Cam Hart can run. Right. But like that kid is moving.
You don't just keep putting him in those looks over and over and over with no help.
Because it's offensive advantage if we're going one-on-one, right? Like, generally speaking.
And you need to be able to use your secondary to protect against the deep ball, and you need to be able to trust your box to dominate the ground attack. If you can't, then you're in big trouble. And if you can't stop Cal's run game with your box, Ryan, this is going to be a long year. Long year.
And to your earlier points, if Cal is creating some explosive plays, like some deep shots to Hunter or Sturdivant, that also tells me that our key number one is not working too well, and they're probably not getting a ton of pressure on the quarterback, right? So those things are intertwined. They go hand in hand, right? Pressure, good coverage, that all comes hand in hand with stopping the deep ball like that.
Yep. No doubt. And so those are going to be interesting aspects of what we see defensively. And then, of course, just play smart. Don't have the dumb mistakes like, a guy's trying to double pass and then you all lose contain and he just runs it for 40 yards. Just dumb thing. Like there were so many not say dumb, that's disrespectful, but just so many silly things you can't do when you're at Notre Dame. Just mistakes you can't make when you're a junior or a senior. Those things have to get fixed, in my opinion. And so that's going to be a big aspect of this, in my opinion, for the Notre Dame.
You're already not playing well. You're already not playing well, and you're playing against a decent football team. So, like, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't make it harder on yourselves. Like, you're already not playing good football right now. You need to reverse the tides, and you don't want to have to play Cal and also against yourselves, right? Like, that's going to be a hard battle to win, right? Like, you want to just be able to play Cal. So don't shoot yourselves in the foot. Keep it clean, because at the end of the day, if you keep it clean and you're making plays – you're more talented than the other team, right? So if you're a clean football team, you're probably going to win the game more than likely, but we haven't seen that yet. So we need to see it in this one.
Yep, absolutely. Ryan, and special teams, it's going to be the same thing as it is every week. Like I never am going to ask this, but hey guys, you guys need to return one for 6 this week. Like if you're begging for that from your special teams, then you've got problems. It's simple. Win the field position battle. Don't make mistakes. Right? Do your job. Don't make mistakes. Right? That's going to be the key for the special teams this week. Don't leave points on the board. If you get a chance to get points, get points. Now, if you're returning the ball and you got a chance to do something with it. That's how you help with field position. What I'm saying is I'm not going out there saying, hey, block a punt, return it, take a kickback for a score. I'm not going to say that has to happen. If that has to happen to beat Cal, this team has major problems. But don't give Cal points, and then don't take away points from your team. That's really the key on special teams for this game.
That's always the key, man. Like keep it clean. Like that's one positive that's come out of the first 2 games is Notre Dame's been pretty good on special teams. I mean, outside of their
kick return unit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like their kick return unit was bad against Ohio State, but otherwise, I mean, they're making their kicks. They're pretty solid from a punting perspective. Their coverage units have been pretty good as well. So it's just about staying clean, man, and being consistent. And so far, Coach Mason's team is Coach Mason's unit, I should say, has been pretty solid. They even had a block punt last game.
So Ryan, let's prediction time. So it's that time, right? I mean, I've been struggling with these predictions all week. We did put an article up today at irishbreakdown.com where we had the entire staff's predictions. I'll just give you some of them for the guys that are not here. Sean Davis predicted Notre Dame to win 23-10. Sean Stiers predicted Notre Dame to win 26-17. And Andrew McDonough predicted Notre Dame to win 23-13. So, Ryan, what is your score prediction and how do you see this game playing out? And you can cheat a little bit if you want to go, this is how I see it, but this is how it could go because I'm going to do that when I talk.
I'll just keep it to how I kind of pictured it in my prediction. So I'm pretty much on the same wavelength as most of those guys. I think our scores are pretty similar in that effect. So I had 27-13 Notre Dame wins. I think more than anything though, Brian, this is a very optimistic perspective in the sense that I think Notre Dame is going to dominate this football game.
Sure.
Right. Like I think that I think it's going to be a 27-13 where you're like, Notre Dame dominated that football game. Like it was never actually that close in their opinion, right? So that's where I'm going right now. I think that you're going to be able to loosen up the interior of the defense with a good running game. I think and you're going to have a good running game, and I think you're going to be turnover free offensively. Defense is going to keep doing what we've seen for the most part over the first two games. Like it's a little inconsistent against Marshall, but it's still been pretty sound for the most part. So 27-13 Notre Dame.
So I kind of cheated a little bit in my prediction. My prediction is 20-16. Notre Dame wins 20-16. And the reality is the reason I went there is because I'm not going to be a believer in this offense until they show it to me. Here's what I believe. I believe Tommy Rees is a really smart guy. I think Tommy Rees is a really smart guy when it comes to scheme. Where the inexperience has hurt him, in my opinion, is there's a lot more to it to being a really good play caller than just being a really smart scheme guy. There is a rhythm to it. There is a process to it. There is a chess match aspect to it that I don't know that he's always shown. He definitely hasn't shown in the first couple games this year. I think we saw it at times last year, especially off the script. They were really good coming out of the gate late last year. What I need to see is that Coach Rees can figure out how to be more process-oriented with that. And the bigger thing for me, where I think that I need to see it from Coach Rees, where I'm just now at the point where I'm not going to predict it until he shows it to me, is that he can go out and get a team ready to play Monday to Friday. And we're just not seeing that right now. And last year, it's a different story. You had an offensive head coach. And again, I think sometimes that was a bad thing for Notre Dame, as I mentioned. But there was at least a process that was laid out for them. Okay. Now you have a defensive head coach, and everybody's made a big stink of this when he was hired. You were hired before the head coach was, right? So people in the administration had a lot of faith that you were going to get this done. And it's time to prove that, because if the other stuff that goes, and I've said this a million times, Ryan, I don't care how smart an offensive coordinator is. What matters and your success is not built on how smart you are. Your success is built on how smart you can make your players. That's the key. And for me, until Coach Rees shows me he can do that, and I believe he's capable of it, I just need to see it. Then it's hard for me to kind of go with a more convincing victory unless it's the defense or special team setting up scores. Now, the other part of what I said was in my prediction is if Notre Dame does come out and do what I think they need to do, we see they're spreading the field. They're maybe pushing the tempo a little bit. They're using Chris Tyree more effectively. They're using the pass game more effectively. They're doing some of the different concepts we've talked about. They're able to take some shots. Drew Pine doesn't turn the ball over. If they come out and play their game and we do see Coach Rees make some of those adjustments, 34-13 would be my prediction. If I had confidence in the offense, that's what I would see, because I feel like once you get Cal down, then Plummer starts to panic, and then he makes mistakes, and then that's when you put him away. So that's kind of how I would see it if I had confidence in the Notre Dame offense. But right now, until they show me that they can block, that they can play with fire, that they can execute, that they can compete for balls, that the quarterback's going to make the throws that are there, I can't go there. They're capable of a convincing win, but I'm not going to predict a convincing win until they show me that they're capable of playing the way they need to play on offense. And so that's where I'm at. So 20-16 is my prediction, is my official prediction. But if the offense does what I think they're capable of doing, then I do think this could be a convincing victory for Notre Dame. I just I'm going to have to believe it when I see it. That's really a big key for me at this point in time. It's
a show me business, man. So I'm there with you. Like, I need to see it, but I'm going to be optimistic until I can't be optimistic anymore. Right. Like if they lay a goose egg, then it's going to start kind of changing my predictions on a week-to-week basis. But
yes,
I think for me that I still believe in the talent on this team, and I still believe in Marcus Freeman. So I think that they're going to come out.
You're predicting what should happen. Yes. That's what you're predicting. You're predicting what should happen, and that's how I've always predicted. But at this point in time, I'm changing my stance until they show me that they can do that. So I'm sympathetic to that.
Well, no, I think that it's a good thought process for you, from being honest, right? Like it's something where your analyst is telling you, like, I need to see it before I can believe in it, right? And I totally get that. Get that, and I respect that. It's just, Notre Dame's just a more talented team, man. Right. They are, and I know they're not playing well. But
13 is the score of what Notre Dame won by the last time Jack Plummer was a quarterback in the stadium. And I would argue,
funny. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, as much as I like the players at Cal, Purdue had better players, especially at the top. I mean, with all due respect to J. Michael Sermon, he may eventually be better than David Bell. Wasn't last year,
now. Yep.
Right? And the offensive line at Purdue was significantly better, and it wasn't great. And as much as I like the players at Cal, there's no George Karlaftis on that team.
There's no George Karlaftis.
That was a quality defensive team early in the season. They wore down a little bit late, but that was a quality defensive team. And so, Notre Dame won with big plays against them last year. If you think it was a competitive game, Notre Dame hit a couple big plays. Can they do that in this game? That's a legitimate question.
Yep.
And it's one that we need to see an answer to. So, and I love some of these predictions that people are making. So I appreciate all that. We're going to have a mailbag at the end of the show. So just so you know, there are a lot of questions that we have. We will get to those at the end of the show. And so we're going to kind of transition in from the Notre Dame breakdown of prediction into some of the big games from college football. Then at the end, we will do our mailbag. All right, so let's get to some of these big games this weekend, Ryan. And I think that for me, there's several really interesting games this weekend for me. And the most interesting for me, there's really two, but the one I kind of zeroed in on as just the most intriguing game for me this weekend is Miami and Texas A&M. And you and I had a bit of a different prediction on this one. I believe you picked Miami, correct?
I picked Texas A&M.
You picked Texas A&M as well, because we were split. Our staff was split a little bit. Sean Davis picked Miami. Andrew picked Miami. Yeah, you picked A&M 28-22. I went A&M 27-24. And in my prediction, I said part of my prediction was Jimbo was eventually going to be forced to bench Haynes King and put in Max Johnson, and he would rally him and win the game. It came out, reports are, now again, I don't know if this has been verified by A&M, but there's multiple reports coming out that Max Johnson is in fact going to start this weekend. I don't think Miami can beat them if Max Johnson starts. I don't know why he didn't start him in the first place, to be completely honest with you. It's still a mystery to me. I never understood that. And the other thing to make it worse is Miami is going to be without their leading receiver this weekend. And that little slot guy, Restrepo's really good player the first couple weeks. So I still need to see Miami kind of go do it to a good team. And I think the worst thing to happen to Miami was A&M losing last weekend. Yeah, because now they're going to be even more ready for this game. I still don't trust Jimbo. This is a game Miami can win, Ryan. It's going to be tough. I mean, A&M just lost to App State. That doesn't mean that they're going to lose to every team that they play the rest of the way. That's not how it works. Yeah. Right. I think A&M was overrated, but I think, and they were flat out, they were not a top 10 team. Apparently neither was Notre Dame. They were not a top 10 team coming into the year. Their talent isn't what people make it out to be, but they're definitely better than what they showed last week. And I think the move to Max Johnson is going to be exactly what they need to get it. And Jimbo keeps trying to run a pro-style offense with mobile quarterbacks, and he doesn't know how to make it work. When his offense works is when he's got a guy that's going to sit back in the pocket and throw the ball, and that's what Max Johnson can do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Brian, it just comes down pretty simple that I'm also not a Jimbo guy. I think anybody that listens to this show knows that I'm not the biggest Jimbo Fisher fan. But unquestionably, Texas A&M is the more talented team. Now, that's not always the team that wins, right? But Texas A&M is a more talented team than Miami. My biggest thing is that I think that Miami 2 years from now is going to be in a really good spot, right? Like, I like Mario Cristobal. I like where he can potentially take this team. I just don't think they're that team right now, right? Like, I don't think that they're quite ready. I don't think they're strong in the trenches, mostly, like defensive line and offensive line wise. I think Texas A&M has better athletes too, just in general. And coming off the loss, I think that Texas A&M is going to come out and they're going to play a good football game, I think. So this is a game that, I mean, I picked 2022. I was really wrestling with Miami or Texas A&M in this one because, again, I'm not a big believer in Jimbo, even though he does have a lot of talent. But I eventually picked the talent just because I think Miami's still a little bit of ways from being that team. And Texas A&M does this every year, man. They have a decent win, and then they have a bad loss. They have a decent win, bad loss, and it's just kind of the rotating door at Texas A&M. So opted for the talent in this one.
Yeah, and I think it's a smart one, and I think too, Texas A&M has speed on defense or on offense, excuse me, and they don't know how to use it. Now Haynes King has a lot of speed too, but as a passer, he didn't know how to use that speed. He couldn't get the ball where it needed to get to against a team with a pulse, a team that, by the way, gave up 63 points the week before to North Carolina. By the way, you know, and they went out and got 14. So I think that there is talent there. And the other thing too is Miami's still growing. Miami's still learning. They were able to kind of come out the first couple weeks and beat up on a couple not very good teams, if we're being honest. You know, and they beat up on Bethune-Cookman, who's awful, and they beat up on Southern Miss last week. I didn't think Miami looked super great last week, to be completely honest with you, in beating Southern Miss. You know, this is the team that lost to Liberty in the opener. You know, and Liberty's okay, but they're not great. But Miami is played sound football so far in their 2 games, for the most part, in my opinion. And that's going to be what you're going to see from Mario Cristobal. They're going to be physical, and they're going to play sound football. I think that Miami has the better quarterback in the game, but that gap has narrowed with Max Johnson playing over. I'm a big fan of Max Johnson. Now, he is not an NFL guy. He is not a future first-round pick. He's just a good, productive college quarterback. And the reason he keeps getting benched is for the same reason Hendon Hooker kept getting benched at Virginia Tech, because coaches fall in love with the traits and the tools, and he doesn't have those tools. Right? He just doesn't have the big arm. He doesn't have he's not like an elite athlete that can go out there and run for 100 yards every game. Like, Haynes King would be like a great, like an old school, like Nebraska quarterback or something like that. Or like, you know, what Clemson was doing back with Woody Dancer back in the day, you know, when he was the first ever 1,000 quarterback, 2,000 passing yards, 1,000 rushing yards. You know, like that's the kind of offense that Haynes King needs to be running in. And I don't understand why he keeps recruiting quarterbacks like that. He did the same thing with Connor Wegman last year, who's a really good run-throw quarterback. I love Connor Wegman, but my whole thing was, but you're going to a school with a coach that has no clue how to use that kind of guy. None. And so that's a bit problematic to me. But Max Johnson, to me, can run the kind of offense that Jimbo Fisher wants him to run. And can get the ball, and can get the ball out accurately to his court, to his players, and get you there. I mean, we've seen him put up big numbers before. I mean, I don't understand why he doesn't get. I mean, look, his dad's, we all know who his dad is, right? His dad's Brad Johnson, former NFL quarterback. Yep. You know, maybe they don't like lefties. I don't know. Maybe that's
I hate lefties. I hate.
So. You know, I don't know what it is, but here's what I know about this kid. When he plays, he puts up numbers. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, like when they played UCLA last year, they didn't lose because of him. You know what I mean? Like he threw 330 against UCLA, 372 against Central Michigan, 5 touchdowns, 280 against Mississippi State in a win, 325 against Auburn. He threw 261 at Kentucky. Now they got blown out, but that's a pretty good day's work for them. 319 against Louisiana Monroe, and then 306, 3 touchdowns in a win over Texas A&M last year. And so it's like, why did you bring him in if you're just going to start Haynes King, right? But Jimbo just has this thing where he wants a dual threat quarterback, but he has no clue how to use it. It's like if you were to like bring me a brand new car and it's just this gorgeous, super expensive car, but it's a stick shift. Hey, guess what? I don't know how to drive a stick shift. I've never driven a stick shift before. So I may love the car. It's a cool car and it looks good in my driveway, but I don't know how to use it, right? So until Jimbo learns how to use that kind of quarterback, he needs to stop recruiting them and recruit more kids like this, because Max Johnson, I think, can run this offense, in my opinion.
Maybe it's the Haynes King throwing motion. That you
my God, that is the weirdest thing. I don't know what that is. Like, you know, like it's the weirdest looking thing.
It's like throwing darts, man. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. Yeah.
Yes. Weirdest thing I've ever seen. So I'm going A&M in this game. Will I be shocked if Miami wins? No, Ryan. I don't think. I mean, predicted close games, but I think A&M wins this one, and I think Miami's going to learn some stuff from it. And I feel good, win or lose, about this game. They're going to have Middle Tennessee and North Carolina coming up at home the next 2 weeks. I see Miami being 4-1. Then they're at Virginia Tech. That game looks winnable. Home against Duke, at Virginia. They got a chance to go on a roll here. The only thing that could stall that is if they get waxed.
Yes.
That's what they have to avoid, is getting waxed where you're confidence goes down. As long as Miami battles for 60 minutes, I think they come out of this game with some confidence and they go on a roll. And I'll say I'll be the winner going into this game, whether Miami wins or lose. I feel much better about picking them to win their division than I did even when I made the prediction. So that's where I'm at with that.
Love it.
So, Ryan, let's move on to our next game. There's 2 games this weekend between ranked teams. One is Miami and Texas A&M. The other one is BYU at Oregon. And BYU has flat dominated Power 5 teams the last 2 years. I mean, like their success against Power 5 teams the last 2 years is really impressive. They beat Baylor in overtime last week. And I believe they went 5-1 last year against Power 5, 6-1 against Power 5 teams. So they are 7-2 or 7-1 against Power 5 teams the last 2 years. They've beaten Arizona, Utah, Arizona State. They lost to Baylor last year, got redemption on that, beat Washington State at Washington State, beat Virginia, and then beat USC last year at USC. BYU comes into this game as the favorite, and Oregon is still the team in everyone's perception that got destroyed by Georgia. Now, nobody's talking about what they did to Eastern Washington this past week, and I know why. It's an FCS school. That's a really good FCS school. That is an FCS school that went 10-3 last year and made it to the national playoffs. Beating them 70-14 is not something to sniff at. It's not like Miami beating Bethune-Cookman by the same score. Bethune-Cookman's not good. Eastern Washington is good. So I think they bounced back. Now we need to find out if they can bounce back against somebody that's as big and as bad as they are that can pop them in the mouth. And that's what we're going to find out this week, because I was actually surprised how Oregon bounced back from that game. I thought they were going to come out and just be like Notre Dame was against Marshall. And this is the thing. I give them a lot of credit. Dan Lanning, I'll give him a lot of credit, because you got embarrassed on national TV in week 1, and your team came out ready to play the next week. And I know the competition wasn't good, but again, we're talking about a playoff team at the FCS level, a team that won the championship a few years ago. Different coach, I get that. But this is a good FCS program, and you annihilated them. That tells me a little something about this team, but not enough for me to confidently say, oh, yes, they're definitely going to beat BYU. I did, however, predict them to win this game. I do have Oregon winning this game. I think that BYU's they're a little banged up on the perimeter. I'm not a big fan of Baylor, honestly, offensively. And I think that was a real good, gritty win, Ryan. But I just think Oregon is going to be able to hurt BYU from a speed standpoint. I saw some things offensively last week from Oregon that I liked. If they can build on those things, I think this team is gonna win this game. And going to Oregon and beating them a week after an overtime win against Baylor is tough sledding. And if they can do it, and all of a sudden BYU becomes a legitimate playoff conversation team moving forward. Legitimate, because then they'll also have Notre Dame coming up in a few weeks. So that's my thoughts on this game, Ryan. What say you?
Not so fast, my friends. BYU is a more physical team than Oregon, and I'm not picking Bo Nix. It's all it comes down to, man. Not picking Bo Nix.
Besides your hatred for Bo Nix, what other things do you like about this match? In all seriousness, what other things do you like about this matchup?
I think that BYU.
I just want to kind of dive into the analysis of it.
I think for me, Oregon defensively, on the defensive line specifically, Brandon Dorius is a pretty good defensive lineman. He's undersized, though, right? They're undersized. DJ Johnson is a decent pass rusher, not much of a run stopper. I think BYU has a clear advantage in the trenches in this game. They have guys like Blake Freeland, Clark Barrington at offensive guard. I think he's also
two of their linemen
on
our all-opponent team for Notre Dame this year.
Yep. They also have an Oregon transfer at right tackle. Apparently, that's a pretty good football player as well. So I think BYU has the clear advantage in the trenches, at least offensively versus defensively.
Agreed.
I wasn't a big fan of what I saw from Oregon's offensive line the 2 weeks ago. I know it was against Georgia, but I don't know. They just looked a tick slow. They didn't look overly physical. So I think BYU is just a more physical football team, and I trust their quarterback more. I think Jaron Hall is a very dependable player. Good athlete. I wouldn't say that he's like this dynamic player, though, right? Like, he's got some dual threat to him. He's a pretty good decision maker.
He reminds me of, he does for BYU what Sam Ehlinger did for Texas. He was not a dynamic athlete. He was not a 4-4 guy. He just was a baller.
Good player.
He could just make plays. And Jaron Hall reminds me a lot of Sam Ehlinger in that regard.
That's interesting.
He just makes plays. Because he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Malik Cunningham. He's not that kind of athlete, a quarterback, but yet he makes a lot of plays.
That's not a bad one at all, because I also just like Jared Hall. I don't know if he's an NFL kid. I don't know if he'll stick there, but like, he's just a really good college quarterback, man. Like, he's gonna keep you in the game, and I think that you're a more physical team than Oregon. So at the end of the day, you're more physical, and I'm going to trust your quarterback a little more. So I'm going to opt for that. And then Dan Lanning has something to prove, and I think BYU has a good coaching staff, though. They've had some familiarity, consistency over the last couple of years. So give me the consistency of BYU. I picked 34-28, but the more I talk about it, Brian, I think the game might be even more lopsided than I think it could be. Like, I think BYU has a chance to run away with this one a little bit.
Sean Davis has a BYU 34-23. You went 34-26. Andrew McDonough went 31-16 in favor of BYU. And so I'm the only person that picked Oregon. So you guys are going to all have a chance to gain on me this week, or I'm going to get some separation.
You're a big Bo Nix guy, so
it's not even about that. It's not about that. I don't hate him like you hate him, and I acknowledge that there are times when Bo looks like trash, and there's times Bo looks really good. Sure. And we'll find out which version of Bo Nix we're going to get this weekend. It really just comes down to, I don't disagree with anything that you said about the trenches. I think Romney and for the life of me, cannot remember the name of the other receiver that was out last week. Neither of them are going to be 100% this week, although I do expect both of them to play.
Nakua or something. Yeah,
I expect both of them to play. He is one of the more dynamic route runners in college football, by the way. I don't know if they're going to be 100% this week. I think that's going to hurt them. I think that they're not real dynamic speed-wise. I do think that they'll score. My score was 34-31. I do think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I just think that Oregon's speed on the perimeter is really where I'm going with this one. And so, yes, they are better in the trenches, but it's at Oregon. So that, I mean, the home field advantage does matter. And I do think that Oregon – I liked how Oregon responded to that embarrassment from the opener. Again, I know it was an FCS school, but they could have walked through it. And Eastern Washington's a good football team. I mean, they are for that level. They're a good football team for that level. Should they beat Oregon? No, they shouldn't beat Oregon. Should it be a close game? No, it should have been a close game. Should it have been 70-14? No. Right? That tells me Oregon did something. And I liked the balance, honestly, in game 2. I did not like the balance in game 1. I'm not a huge Kenny Dillingham fan, to be completely honest with you, as an offensive coordinator, but I do think they come and get this one done. I do. I think this is what Oregon's going to be all year. There's going to be games you're like, yep, Oregon turned the corner, they're back, and then the next week they lose to like Arizona at home. You know what I mean? Like that's how they're going to be this year, in my opinion. I really think that. Did you see for BYU last week they had a kid that caught 9 catches for over 100-something yards? Last name Roberts. Great last name. Great last name. Yeah. There you go.
Tremendous. Only good athletes have that last name.
So Ryan has BYU winning 34-26. You could see it being. So you're saying if you're off score-wise, it's because you think BYU wins by even more.
Yes.
I have BYU winning 34-31. Let's get to this next game, Ryan. And this is going to be a very interesting game, in my opinion. We're going to stay out in the Pac-12. We're going to go number 11 Michigan State at Washington. Now, the first thing that we can both admit is we really don't know how good Washington is, because in the first 2 games, Washington has played Kent State, who's not good, and Portland State, who's not good. and they destroyed both of them. But here's what I do know. Kalen DeBoer is one of the better offensive minds in all of college football. He was that way all the way back to, where was he, like Sioux Falls, right? When he was dominating at Sioux Falls at NAIA as an offensive coordinator at every level he's been at. He did a great job at Indiana, and then he did a great job at Fresno. Took over at Fresno, turned them into a big-time program. And the thing about this matchup that I find really fascinating is Washington was such a horribly coached football team last year under Jimmy Lake. They were undisciplined. The coaches had no discipline. You got coaches striking players. They were in just silly penalties, missing on things. The issue at Washington, what I know it was not, was talent. They did not lack talent. They lacked coaching. And I think that this is a thing, this is where this game comes into play for me. So Michigan State is a good football team, and they're running the ball well. They've got one of the better running back depth charts in college football. Obviously, we know about Jalen Berger, who's had 2 good first games. But they also have Jarek Broussard, who was a really good runner at Colorado, has done some nice things in the first couple games as the number 2. And they have Elijah Collins, who's like 3 years ago rushed for almost 1,000 yards at Michigan State. Very good backfield, good running game. Peyton Thorne has not been sharp so far for me. They have 1 good receiver this year, where they had 2 last year. And so when I look at this matchup, I think that Michigan State should be able to move the ball on Washington. But what I don't think is, I don't think that Michigan State is going to be able to stop Washington. And this is really what it comes down to for me. So for my prediction, I'm going Washington 38 and Michigan State 33. And the reason I'm going with that is I do think Michigan State will be able to move the ball. I think they'll be able to run the ball. They'll get some big plays. But I don't think that Michigan State has a chance to stop the pass game at Washington. And I don't know what it is about Michael Penix and playing in this kind of offense. You know, we saw it in 2019, Kalen DeBoer's last year. We saw it in 2020, where there was still a lot of the Kalen DeBoer influence for him. And he had some really big numbers in the COVID year. And his numbers the first 2 weeks are tremendous. Now, again, I know the competition hasn't been that great. But here's what I like about it. Okay, number 1, I love the system. I love Kalen DeBoer. He's been on my radar for years as an offensive coordinator. That's obviously out the window now because he's head coach. But as an offensive mind, he was a guy that was on my radar. Love what he does schematically. He knows how to get his teams ready to play. They execute at a high level. Ryan, you and I had the quarterback at Jake Hefner, right? I always get his last name. Hefner, excuse me. Hainer. There you go. We had him as in our top 15 quarterbacks this year, and a lot of it was just he was from Washington, and Kalen DeBoer did a great job coaching him up and getting him going, and we're seeing him continue to build on that success. And with Washington, they came out, and Michael Penix the first 2 games was on fire. But the other thing is they didn't have Rome Odunze in the last game. He didn't play. And with him out, you know, it's like, okay, well, one of your better receivers. So Giles Jackson, a transfer from Michigan, steps in, and he goes for over 100 yards, you know, against Portland State again, but 6 catches for 105 yards. Well, you're going to get Rome back this week. I love Jalen McMillan. Everybody knows that I've loved him since high school. You're finally starting to see Jalen McMillan step out. Now that he has here's a crazy thought. Now that they're actually playing him and giving him a chance to play, and he has a quarterback that can actually complete passes, he looks like a star again. 9 catches, over 200 yards, 3 touchdowns in 2 games. So, and this is against a team that last year finished dead last in college football in pass defense. I don't think they've improved that much. They play 2 teams that can't throw the football. That's what I think from the first 2 weeks. Now, are they going to be better in pass defense this year? Yeah, I think so. But I think they're going to
get much worse.
No. Literally can't get worse. Like literally there's no one beneath them last year. So I have a feeling that this is going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be a shootout from 2 contrasting styles of play, but I think Washington wins in the end because I think they're Michael Penix, if he can stay healthy, that system with the talent they're going to have a receiver. They have 3 receivers on the team that have already basically had 100-yard games. Rome was like 6 yards underneath that in the opener. I think they're going to come out and roll offensively. Washington's defense is going to make enough stops to win the game in the end. Washington 38, Michigan State 33. Ryan Roberts, what say you?
So, I mean, we have a similar outlook in the sense that I also think Washington is going to win this football game. I picked a little bit of a lower score just because I think the Washington defense is very improved this year, Brian, and I agree. I think that there's going to be some success for Michael Penix and throwing to guys like Jalen McMillan and Giles Jackson and all those. You know, they have a 3-headed beast at receiver right now. So I can see them throwing the football around the yard a little bit. I just think the tempo of the game is going to be a little bit slower, just because I think that the Washington defense is going to kind of come to play a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit more ball control. But either way, I think that Washington's going to win out, because I think that Michigan State is going in a good direction. I thought last year you saw a lot of great things from Mel Tucker. I'm just not convinced that there's stay power yet at that level, right? So I think they're going to take a slight step back, just naturally, right? There's going to be a slight regression. They're not going to be as good as they were last year. So I think that they're going to be a good football team, but I think Washington just has some good stuff going for them right now, man. And honestly, I just watched a little bit of their film on the coach's film. Yeah. I'll say this, Jalen McMillan's a dude, and I'll tell you who else is a dude. Braylon Trice, I think, is going to have a good football game on the defensive side of football, man. He played again, didn't play great teams yet.
Ryan, they were not as bad as their record last year. Can we that was 2016 Notre Dame stuff, where they were 10-3 the year before, they went 10-3 the year after. It just was the perfect storm of bad coaching and stupidity and undiscipline all kind of came together with 4-8 last year, right? This is a team that the year before during the COVID year was 4-1, 3-1, right? Their only loss was to Stanford. So you really don't know what they were that year. That was a mess of a year, and I think that hurt them as well. 2019, they were 8-5. They had a 1-point loss to Cal, 4-point loss to Oregon, 5-point loss to Utah, 6-point loss to Colorado, right? They were not a bad team. In 2018, they went 10-4. In 2017, they went 10-3. In 2016, they made the college football playoff and went 12-2. Last year was the anomaly. Yes. This team didn't all of a sudden not have talent. And I'm telling you right now, Terrell Bynum by the end of the season is going to greatly regret leaving Washington to go to USC. I get why he did it. I believe he left before Kalen DeBoer became the head coach. But he would be – could you imagine if Terrell Bynum was still there with Rome and Jalen McMillan and Giles Jackson in the slot? What kind of numbers this pass game would be putting up right now? So they didn't lose talent. It's like with Notre Dame in 2016. Oh, Notre Dame doesn't have players. They have the same players they had last year and the same players they have next year for the most part. I mean, you lost some guys, but you have other guys stepping up. It was never a talent thing. It was a poor coaching thing. And that's what I see from Washington. So, and I think if Michigan State wins this game, it is a huge statement that Mel Tucker has this thing completely turned around. I thought last year was a little bit of smoke and mirrors at times. The Big Ten was a little bit down. They kind of caught lightning in a bottle. Nobody thought Kenneth Walker was going to be what he was last year. No. I actually like the depth of their running backs better this year. Nobody's as good as Kenneth Walker is. Sure. But I talked about this when you had to step away, Ryan. When you look at the Jalen Berger, who's a good back. Jarek Broussard was a really good runner at Colorado before he came there. And then Elijah Collins was a borderline 1,000-yard back early in his career at Michigan State. It's a good backfield. It's just I think I think Washington is a top 25 caliber team. So even though they're unranked, I do think this is them going on the road and playing a top 25 caliber football team. And it's a tough ask to ask them to do that. But if they can keep it competitive, then that's a win for me. But if they go on the road and beat Washington, that's a big signal for Michigan State that they have truly turned a corner and put the couple bad years behind them.
I'll say this too. One last note about Washington, Brian, is that Michael Penix, when he doesn't have chaos around him, it's a pretty good quarterback, man. Like that was the biggest thing at Indiana was the offensive line wasn't good and he would just get injured a ton, right? Because he was getting hit so much. Washington, even without Jackson Kirkland, who was their star left tackle, even though he did a terrible game against Michigan last year, he's been out this year. But they still have Rosengarten, I think is his last name, Andrew Rosengarten, or Roger Rosengarten, I forget, but he's a good right tackle. Number 73, he's a good football player. They have a number 55 that's filling in at left tackle for Kirkland. That's done a really nice job in pass protection. So as long as you keep Penix
Kirkland's going to be back for this game either, from what I read. It's been about 24 hours since I did a check on that, but it sounded like he was probably going to be out again this game.
And even without him right now, they are protecting at a very high level. Again, not against a great team, but I also don't think I think Michigan State's got a couple pretty good interior rushers. Yeah. Like they have the Slade kid, and then they have the Barrow kid, who's a younger player, Simeon Barrow. But they don't really have any defensive ends that worry me a ton, right? So I think Washington's going to be able to protect the passer enough, and I think that they're going to eke out a victory. I had 24-21 in my prediction.
So you had third. What was your score?
24-21 Washington.
Okay, yeah, you do have a lower scoring game. Some of the other scores that we had. Sean Davis predicted Washington to win 37-24. We were mixed on this one as well. Sean Stiers has Michigan State winning 34-28. Andrew McDonough has Washington winning 33-20. So we were all sort of in the same. Everyone believes it's going to be a competitive game. And the only thing that would not surprise me if Michigan State wins. The only thing that will surprise me is if one of the two teams got blown out. That would surprise me. I think this is going to be a good football game. And it might be one of the more entertaining football games of the weekend, if not the most entertaining game of the weekend.
I agree.
Because I think I love games with contrasting styles.
Mm-hmm.
And Michigan State will throw it. They're not like old school, like, Wisconsin, right? They run it, but they threw the ball well. I mean, everybody talked about Kenneth Walker last year, but their two receivers is what made the difference for them because they could take the pressure off of Kenneth Walker. If you tried to load the box,
the Jalen's, man, Jalen Naylor and Jalen Reed. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wish the other kid would have come back this year. I really wish he would have come back this year. Because if he would have come back, because he had another year, if Naylor would have come back, boy, that with Keon Coleman, that group would have been really fun to watch. And my prediction might be a little bit different. But I haven't been in love with what I've seen from Peyton Thorne so far this year, to be honest with you, Ryan. Now, again, it's bad competition. Maybe he's not amped up for it. But I think that's one of the things that has me not super confident in this game. Because I think Washington, as you said, Washington has some good defense. I think they're going to be able to – if Michigan State can't hit some shots outside, they're going to be able to slow down the run game enough to give their offense a chance to win this one. So it'll be a fun game. It's going to be a fun game.
Agreed.
Let's get to our next game, Ryan, and this is going to be an interesting one, and that is Penn State at Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another one where I kind of went against the grain with everybody, and it's not so much that I have any faith in Auburn because I really don't have a lot of faith in Auburn right now. Yeah. It's just that, number one, Auburn can't be that bad. It's like I've convinced myself of that.
You don't think so?
I think they have players. I think they have some players. Like they're not a team devoid of talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a weird 2 games, and it just kind of reminds me a lot of what we saw from Notre Dame in 2018. They're not as good as Notre Dame in 2018. But it's kind of like when they kind of slept walk through the Ball State game and the Vanderbilt game, and then they finally figured it out. I think the 2 wins they had, although they were ugly, they needed them because it has been such a tumultuous offseason. Like they just needed to get some confidence rolling. And I think they can slow down the Penn State run attack. I do not think Penn State runs the ball right now. They ran the ball well last week against Ohio. Ohio's not good. No. They could not run on Purdue, right? I mean, they could not run on Purdue. Purdue gave them that game. I mean, Jeff Brom cost his team that football game. And I'm as big of a Jeff Brom supporter as there is. He did a terrible job in the last 5 minutes of that game. Mm-hmm. They should be 1-1 right now with a loss to Purdue. I don't think Auburn's that good. I just don't think Penn State's that good right now. And the quarterback situation is a little bit of a tricky thing, because you got all these people calling for Drew Aller, even though Sean Clifford's the winner. And I look at this and I don't know if Penn State, I just haven't liked what I've seen from. I don't even know if I could put my finger on it, Ryan. And I'm someone who predicted Penn State to be a bounce back team this year, but I just haven't liked the body language I've seen from that team. I think they, I'd like, maybe that the way they came back against Purdue is going to spark them, but I didn't love what I saw against Ohio. They're just better than Ohio. You know what I mean? Like I didn't love it, but then, Auburn beat San Jose State 24-16. So I haven't really been impressed with either one of these football teams so far. And if they had anybody but TJ Finley at quarterback, I'd feel really good about picking Auburn. But but thing I said in my prediction is he can't be this bad, right? Like, he was so bad in the first 2 games. He can't be that bad. He's due for some kind of decent game, right? That's what I've convinced myself of, Ryan. And that was the reasoning behind me picking him. But it's in seriousness, though, I picked Auburn 24-20. I think Penn State will have some kind of mistake, some kind of turnover, some kind of kick mistake, something like that that's going to allow Auburn to win this game. And it really comes down to I just haven't liked what I've seen from Penn State up front in either game so far. And that's not where you want to not be good against Auburn, in my opinion.
So I'm going to start with Penn State because I did pick Penn State to win this football game. I'll end with my prediction. The things I like about Penn State. Nicholas Singleton, I think, is going to be a stud. To your point, didn't run the ball great in the first game against Purdue, but I'm going to assume that there's going to be a trajectory.
Not because of him.
Yes.
It's not because of him.
Well, but Brian, I think that there are a couple decent pieces up front for the offensive line.
There's
for Penn
several
State.
good pieces. They just can't put it together.
I know they can't. I know they can't. But I'm going to. I think that it's going to get better as the season goes on. I think Fashanu at left tackle is a really good player. I think that Landon Tangwell is a good football player inside as well. So I think Penn State's offensive line is going to improve, as do I do the freshman Nick Singleton. I think Parker Washington's a good football player. And Penn State's always going to have talent on defense. Like, they're always going to have some guys, right? So this year it's Joey Porter Jr. and number 23, I forget his name, the linebacker is a decent little football player. So Adisa Isaac is a decent pass rusher as well on that team. So that's kind of what they're working with this year from a structural perspective. The reason I picked Penn State, though, is not as much about Penn State as it is about Auburn. I just don't see it with Auburn, man. I just don't. I mean, yeah, there's a couple good football players. Tank Bigsby is a good running back, no doubt. The defensive end, Derek Hall, is a good football player, no doubt. But offensive line, I think, is pretty not great. TJ Finley, I know, is pretty not great. So he's really bad, man. He's really bad. And I think that team is just – I think they're an implosion away from just a new coaching staff and just a new culture there, right? Like, I think they're in a really bad situation. So again, I'm not a big James Franklin guy. Yeah, definitely not a big Sean Clifford guy. But I'm just don't believe in anything that Auburn's doing right now. So I had Penn State 27-17 over Auburn, because Auburn will still Penn State's not going to blow them out, because Auburn still does have some talent, to your point. Sure. I just can't believe in Auburn at all. I just can't do it.
I get it, dude. Trust me, I get it. I completely understand it. I don't like what Manny Diaz is doing defensively.
No, I don't. I agree there. I agree there. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was the toughest game to predict this weekend, to be completely honest with you, just because, like you said, it's like, which team not playing great do I want to pick? I will say this. The winner of this game is going to have a boost, in my opinion, because I think Auburn's talent is a little better than you think, maybe, and again, I'm reading into your comments, so I could be incorrect. I think their talent's a little better than you think it is. This isn't a vintage Auburn team that just has poor coaching. This is a team that hasn't recruited well under Brian Harsin so far, but they're not a team devoid of athletes. They have some athletes. When you look at their schedule, they are 2-0. They have Missouri at home the next week, LSU at home the next week. Then their schedule ramps up a little bit. I think that this is the kind of win that Auburn needs to kind of get some confidence and some momentum to be able to put together a good season. If they lose at home to Penn State, that will begin the implosion, and Brian Harsin will not be the coach by game 12. That's my prediction.
Well, good news for them is that they have Missouri next week, who is terrible.
Yes,
so
they
can always have a bounce
But
back.
if they lose this game, I could see them just
going in the
off,
toilet.
right?
Yeah.
And then the opposite is true. If Penn State goes on the road and wins this game, then I feel the same thing about what I just said about Auburn. I think that is the thing that kind of gives Penn State the momentum that they need to go out and say, okay, we got this W. You've got Central Michigan coming up next. You've got Northwestern coming up after that. All of a sudden, Penn State jumps way up in the rankings, and they've got some momentum. They've got some confidence. Because I think if they win this game, it most likely means the offensive line does start to come together. I believe Salim Morley still is starting right guard as well, correct? I believe he's still starting right guard.
Maybe. I know they moved
coming out of high school.
They moved Juice Suggs or Scruggs or whatever to center, and the Caden Wallace kid at right tackle is bad. He's a bad football player.
Yeah, he was a pretty highly ranked kid coming out of high school. But yes, if they win this game, it means that unit starts to come together. And if that unit starts to come together, that's what Penn State needs to bounce back. And so I think they start going. The concern I have with them too, Ryan, is they have some players on defense, but they don't have the players they've had, top to bottom. Like, the kid you talked about on the edge player, he's a nice player, but they've had guys like Jason Owe, and I mean, they've had some dudes on the edge in recent years and haven't really utilized them. They completely underutilized Brandon Smith, partly because Brandon Smith didn't want to hit anybody, right? But I don't see the talent there. Curtis Brooks is the kid you were referring to. The other
Curtis Brooks,
he's a good player.
He can run. He can run.
Right. But they lost their Mike from last year, who I thought was a good leader for them, Ellis Brooks. I just don't see the top to bottom talent that they've had in past years. And Joey Porter's excellent, but they would have him plus 3 other future NFL players in the secondary, right? And combine that with Manny Diaz. So your lack of faith in TJ Finley is exactly where I am with my lack of faith in, or your lack of faith in Bo Nix is exactly where I am from a coaching standpoint with Manny Diaz.
I don't have any confidence in TJ Finley either. So your point stands either way.
So he's so bad. At least Bo Nix, it's frustrating because you see him, he has some talent and he can have some good games. TJ Finley just isn't talented, in my opinion. And I've never understood the infatuation with him. Like
he had one touchdown, 3 interceptions so far. It's
not good.
It's not
against a mighty competition of San Jose State and Mercer. But here's one thing I'll say, and this is going to sound silly. Part of the reason is I've really been impressed with Auburn's run defense so far. People are like, they shut down Mercer. Mercer ran for almost 400 yards the week before. Mercer's a decent 1AA football team. Like, we make fun of them because Alabama plays them all the time. Yep. But they're a really good running football team, right? And they held them to 74 yards. They completely shut down San Jose State. And San Jose State, but they did what you're supposed to do to a team that you're way better than. They shut it down.
I do like the linebacker for Auburn, Owen Popo or however you pronounce his name. He's a good football player.
He was a big time recruit coming out of high school.
He's played well, man. He got injured last year, but he's put some good film on there.
So I just think they have better players than maybe some people think, and I think they're going to win this game. But this is going to be this is one of the most impact games of the weekend, meaning how this game impacts is going to potentially send each team on a completely different direction than they otherwise would have gone in. So that'll make this one very fascinating. Let's get to a couple other games, Ryan. Here's an interesting one. Oklahoma at Nebraska. I'm not going to offer predictions for these next two, but Oklahoma Nebraska is a very fascinating game for me because I thought that this game was a game that Nebraska could win going into the season if Scott Frost got the team playing to its potential, because Nebraska has some players. They gave Oklahoma a game last year in Norman, just like they gave everyone a game. But it has boggled my mind that with your job on the line, because of how undisciplined your program has been, that Scott Frost has somehow created an even more undisciplined program than what he had before. It's embarrassing. And he needed to be – I don't advocate for people to be fired. I didn't advocate for him to be fired because I just don't do that. He would have been someone that if I was covering that program, I would have advocated for him being fired. Because one of the things I've said is it's not my job to call for you to be fired unless I feel you're doing things non-football related to bring about your dismissal and where you can't be the leader of these young men. And that's as much as anything why he got fired, as much as anything than what is happening on the field. Yep. So one of two things is going to happen this weekend in this game, Ryan. One, the implosion will continue in full force at Nebraska, coming off of a loss to Georgia Southern. Full force, they will implode. Then the other one is, now that he's been fired, that cancer has been removed from the program and everybody settles down and they get back to playing, to their potential. And Oklahoma looks at this team and says, they're 1-2. They lost to Northwestern and Georgia Southern. We're going to roll this team, and they overlook them. I'm leaning towards the implosion continues, but what makes this game fascinating is if Nebraska plays a clean game, they are a talent. I don't want to say they're a good football team because they're not a good football team.
They have talent.
They're a talented football team. That's what's going to make this finish. And I still don't know if we know really who Oklahoma is, because that's where we're at with some of these teams early in the year, Ryan, because some of these teams have played – the competition they've played has just been so bad that I don't think we really know what we have in these teams. Oklahoma's played UTEP and Kent State, and honestly, they've won by 32 and 30. They were relatively underwhelming wins. I mean, North Texas beat UTEP 31-13. UTEP's 1-2 right now. Their win was a 7-point win over New Mexico State. I'm not in love. Kent State is 0-2. They lost by 25 to Washington and 30 to Oklahoma. So I'm just not in love with what I've seen so far from Oklahoma. More so not in love. I just don't know if I know a lot about what this team is made of yet. And whereas Nebraska's kind of been through the fire a little bit so far this year.
It's fair. I mean, I think that there are two wild card teams in different ways, right? Like, you don't know how Nebraska is going to react to the firing of Scott Frost, if they're going to right the ship a little bit. You also don't know exactly what Oklahoma is, just based upon the teams that they've played so far. Right. And they're also a new regime, right? So I agree. There's a little bit of a wild card factor. I'm going to take the implosion for 500, though, Alex. I'm going to take this, okay? Because I think that Nebraska is going to get a lot worse this year before it eventually rights the ship a little bit. So I'm going to take Oklahoma because I think that Oklahoma's defense is going to be a little bit better, just naturally because Brett Venables has the structure of the defense. Sure. And I think that they just have more talent right now than Nebraska does. And Nebraska's going through turmoil. Like, that's just my biggest thing right now. Because I agree. Like, the Anthony Grant kid, good football player, the running back for Nebraska, the freshman. He's a good football player. They got a couple players on defense, the O'Shawn Mathis kid.
And some receivers that can run, too. I mean, they just can't hang on to the ball when they've gained 50 yards against Northwestern and get stripped. Yeah. You know, when they get close to the goal line.
It's ugly, man. Like, it's just they're
if they had a good coach, they would have blown Northwestern out.
100%.
And they would have beat Georgia Southern. They'd be 3-0 right now. I mean, that's what their talent is. But it's not so easy to just say, hey, you fired the coach and it just everything's miraculously better.
Everything's going to click now. Yeah, right.
Sometimes that happens, Ryan. We've seen it, right? But sometimes the implosion continues. And that's the unknown about, and that's why I'm not making a prediction. I have no clue how this game is going to play out. But it's one of those things where if the new coach can kind of say, hey, guys, let's just relax. We got nothing to lose. Let's go and have some fun. Let's just play Nebraska football. I could see them making this a game. I could. And, but I'm not predicting it, but I could see it.
I could see them keeping it close for a little bit, like kind of playing above their head for a little bit. I just ultimately, I think, Marvin Mimses of the world are just going to kind of separate this game at that point. So I know we're kind of seeing this game similar. I know you're just laying out like different.
Sure. I'm not predicting Nebraska to win.
Yeah.
I'd be this is one of those, if I'm Oklahoma, I'm a little nervous about this game if I'm an Oklahoma fan. Because if Frost was still there, Oklahoma wins by 30. Right? Like that team's would have imploded. I mean, they didn't want him there, and I don't know. Like, there's some bad people in coaching, and that's a bad dude. Yeah. Like some of the stuff I've heard, just use Google, folks. Use Google, because some of the stuff I've heard from multiple sources, just the same thing over and over. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Like that's not a good dude.
Not a great. So
that's going to make it no.
Not a great
so you're
leader,
shocked that they play undisciplined football.
Yep.
And we're practicing going to start. Where's coach? Nobody see coach? Okay, coach isn't here. You know what I mean? Like, okay. So there you go. So that's my thoughts on Nebraska and Oklahoma. Last game, Ryan, that we're going to talk about. Fresno State at USC. Now, your boy Jonathan Smith made this game a little less interesting by pulling out a win last week. That was a big, big, big win for Oregon State. Yep. Because this is a good Fresno State football team. It is. And that was a really good win last week by Oregon State. Did you get a chance to watch any of the game?
Just the highlights.
It's a great game. And really, really good game. Haener was excellent, as you'd expect. They just couldn't stop. They couldn't stop Oregon State. I mean, and here's the thing. Here's what impressed me about Oregon State last week, Ryan, is they didn't even run the ball incredibly well last week against Fresno. So that kind of surprised me a little bit. They ran for $178, but they only went for 180, like 4.8 yards a carry. They made some plays in the pass game last week. That's what kind of surprised me. I mean, the yards weren't great, but they made some plays, and then their defense made stops and they didn't make stops. So, but I'll tell you what, this Fresno State team can move the ball and score. And I'm very curious to see how this game goes in this matchup, because that's going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting to see how this is going to play out.
So it's a little bit of a strange Fresno State team, though, Brian. It's a little strange. Their offense is really good. I mean, you mentioned Jake Haener, the wide receiver. Its name is escaping me right now, but he's a really good football player. The defense isn't that great, though, it seems early on, right? Like, they have Evan Williams, who's a pretty good safety, but otherwise, they're not playing great on the defensive side of the ball, and that's ultimately why I think that they're going to come out on the wrong end of this one, USC-wise, just because I think that USC just has a little too much firepower for them. Like, I think that Fresno State has enough firepower of their own to stay there for a little bit. But ultimately, I just think, at the end of the day, it's going to be Jordan Addison and those types of guys that are going to kind of distance themselves a little bit. So
I think this game's going to be a little bit more competitive than you do. I think USC is going to win. I do. I think USC I mean, Stanford turned the ball over on 3 of their first 4 possessions last week. Like, and including, I think, twice going into score. USC's offense USC's defense was not playing well against Stanford last week. Now, I mean, you allowed Stanford to run for over 200 yards. Like, maybe Stanford all of a sudden became good at running the ball. We'll find out. It's still early. It's 2 games in. Man. But that's a little bit concerning to me if I'm Fresno State or if I'm USC, to be completely honest with you. And I thought that Stanford moved the ball really well. It's just they turned it over a bunch.
They did.
So, and I think Fresno can move the ball. I think USC is going to win because I don't think Fresno couldn't stop Oregon State. They're not going to stop USC. But I think it's going to be a very interesting game. And the thing I like about it, and I think we have a USC fan in here. He said USC is a work in progress and USC made a lot of mistakes. And that's why this game intrigues me, because we're still learning about USC. You know, how do they get – okay, you get up for Stanford because they've smacked you in the mouth a lot lately. Can you get up for Fresno? Do you overlook Fresno? Do you clean those things up? Like, Caleb Williams starts off great and then kind of fades in the second half. You know, is that just kind of who he is? We saw that a little bit from him at Oklahoma last year. We'd start off good and then kind of fade. You know, can the defense get any better? Or is this just what they're going to have to do every week? Are they just Oklahoma again, where they're just going to win shootouts all the time? This is why this game really intrigues me. And I don't have a prediction for the game. I think USC is going to win. Yep. But this game is going to be a very intriguing game because it's going to tell us a lot about USC's defense. And I think it's going to tell us a little bit about Stanford too, because if Fresno struggles to move the ball, it tells us maybe Stanford's going to be a little better team this year. But I'd be a little concerned if I was a USC fan about what they did defensively in this game. Now, is it as bad as what Notre Dame has been on offense this year? No, but that's not the comparison. But do they improve, right? Because they're just 2 games in, man. You know, they're just 2 games in from trying to turn over a terrible program. And so can they kind of come up and make stops? Because this is the kind of team that I think can really expose your defense if you're not improved. But if you can slow down Fresno, then it tells me that maybe their defense is slowly trending in the right direction. It's going to be interesting.
I think this score is going to be something like 45-31. Like, I think that Fresno is going to keep – I think they're going to keep it close for a while, and then ultimately it's just going to be a little too much firepower. Like, that's just kind of where I see it. But
basically,
I think Hayden will be in the game for a while.
So basically, you see it being a lot like that 2005 game. Do you remember that?
I'm trying to
think. One where Reggie Bush just went off.
Yes. Yeah.
Fresno kept it close. It ended up being 50-42, but I think Fresno scored last in that game, if I remember correctly. Maybe USC did. But where Fresno, I mean, had a lead late, and USC just had too much talent. I could see it being a lot like that.
Reggie Bush had like 300 yards rushing in that game, right?
Insane.
Or some crazy number.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know what his actual number. Here, let me see if I can pull it up real quick.
It was a ridiculous game. He was like just running to the sideline and cutting back across the green.
Yeah, remember the one he like kind of put the ball behind his back. You know, he had that run, I think, in this game. Reggie had 294 rushing yards and 68 receiving yards in the game. And I think he had a return in the game as well, if I remember correctly. But he had 7 kick returns for 193 yards and a punt return for 16 yards. Just had an absolutely insane game. For them. And then Paul Penninger was the quarterback. You remember Paul Penninger?
He wasn't a bad player, man.
No, he really wasn't. He really wasn't. Wendell Mathis was their leading rusher in the game. You know, so yeah, it was one of my favorite games to watch. It was just like exciting up tempo game. I don't think it's going to be quite that much scoring, but I think it's going to be a very similar up and down the field game. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and it's a great opportunity for Jake Haener from an NFL draft standpoint to go and play against a guy that a lot of people think is an elite future, first-round draft pick, get a chance for him to go on the road against a Pac-12 team, for the second week in a row and shine because he played really well last week. And if he can go on the road and do the same thing again this week against USC, then it's like, okay, this kid, he's small, but this kid can flat out play.
He can sling it, man. He's got a good arm for his size too. So I'm there. I like Jake Haener actually as an NFL draft prospect. And I think he's a really, really good college quarterback. Like there's no doubt about that, man. He's good. And that's why I think he's going to keep this game close for a while. It's just ultimately USC just has a few more athletes than Fresno.
Agree. Let's go back and let's do a mailbag, Ryan. So we've kind of broken down those games. Let's jump into a mailbag. And we have a lot of comments here, and we're gonna get to these as quickly as we can. AST 12321 with a super chat. Thank you. Are there passing concepts that can protect Pines, INT, Tennessee, but still be effective versus Cal? We had another question too about this, about things that they can do to kind of limit Drew Pine's turnover potential. The challenge in this game for designing a game plan around Drew Pine is you cannot avoid the middle of the field, but you have to be smart about how much you throw over the middle of the field, Drew Pine. Yeah. And it's not because of his size or height or whatever. It's just because he just will force balls, and he will just not make good reads and not make clean reads. So, to me, I need to see them do some things early with the quick game, maybe move the pocket. Somebody asked about, bootleg. I don't know if, bootleg per se, maybe quick half roll, sprint outs, just some things where you're getting some easy now screens. RPOs need to be a big part of the thing with Drew Pine, the perimeter RPOs. I'm not throwing a bunch of slants with Drew because he just doesn't seem to see inside real well. And, so those are things for me because they've got to get his confidence going because Drew Pine has not played well since the Cincinnati game. I mean, he had a bad spring, all spring. He didn't have a good fall camp. Tommy Reese and the coaches can say all they want about how good he was in fall camp. I have not heard from a single source that actually confirmed that with how he played. Now, does that mean that determines how he's going to be in games? No, it doesn't. But this is what we're going to learn about Drew. Is he a gamer? Is he a guy that just, maybe he doesn't have it in practice, but you get the lights on and with his attitude and intel and all that? Sure. But, he the biggest misnomer about Drew Pine is that he's really accurate. And that's been actually the biggest concern for me because he doesn't throw the ball super accurately. Even last year's ball placement wasn't phenomenal. Like I remember the 1 3rd down conversion against Wisconsin, I think it was a Cincinnati, where Kevin Austin has kind of catch the ball off the ground. Do you remember that? Like, how'd you miss that badly? He's got to come out and get into a nice early rhythm. If he can get into an early rhythm, then I think there's some things you can do pass game wise, but it's going to be perimeter stuff, Ryan, RPOs. And here's the other thing. Give him some calls where it's one read early. Like it's go slide, go deep post check down, where you're just not giving him a lot of full field reads and high-low reads where he's got to read all 3 levels. It's like, yeah, we're running a high-low, but the post is a clear out based on this coverage, and we're just reading this one. Those are things that I think they need to do schematically to help get him into an early rhythm.
I like your half roll suggestion. I love play action in this game. I love RPO. Clear vision's the biggest thing for me with him, right? And like those things are designed to give a quarterback an easy and clear vision. Like that's what I want to see with Drew Pine. I want to make it easy on him early. I just want to make it easy. He's a kid where he's a rhythm passer, right? So if you get him in a good rhythm early, you could have a good result. But if he struggles early and he's, his confidence is a little shook, then that's where you have the threat of him just kind of not having a good game overall, right? So those types of things, not really passing concepts. I mean, like RPO is technically, but like a half roll is not a passing concept, but like it's something that you can do in your offense that I think could just kind of give him easy vision, clear vision. Don't make him work through traffic a ton early on in this game. Give him some easy completions. That's the biggest thing for me is you have to manipulate and create space, man. Like again, this is a game where I think Tommy Reese can answer some bells because he's going to have to be a little creative with getting some easy decisions and easy reads early with Drew Pine. Get him comfortable. That's what you need to do.
Got a super chat from YJax. Thank you for that. He said that touched how kind you were to Irish One. Thanks. I don't. Your name doesn't look familiar, so I don't know if you're just someone who watches but never comments. But that's the kind of community we want to have here. We're here to talk ball. And as long as people are respectful, I don't care if you're a Notre Dame fan, USC fan. We have a USC fan in the chat today. We have a Michigan fan in the chat usually, Ohio State fan in the chat today. We're trying to build a community of people who love college football. And obviously the foundation of that is Notre Dame football. Sure. But we also want to have people that just are, it's a community is that you look out for each other. You care for each other. And whatever you can do, whether it's we did a fundraiser last year, we raised over $10,000 for the local homeless shelter and community. If it's offering prayer for people, whatever it is, that's what we want to build. It's not just about sports. This is people that view this as a family to a degree, their football family. And so I appreciate that you recognize that. And I want people that are struggling to know that they have a place they can go to and have people that care about them. So I appreciate that. And it's not that way because of me and Ryan. Yeah. It's that way because of all y'all.
Everyone.
That's the reality of it.
And on top of being really good looking guys, we're also extremely nice and polite and
some
caring.
of us have wonderful humility. So Patrick McGrain with a super chat. Thank you very much. He goes, do you think any player has made an Ed Reed speech yet? I sure hope so.
It's got to be something, man. The best thing about Ed Reed is he was a great football player, but everyone knows that clip at Miami, right? Where like, don't talk to me, I'm hurt.
Right.
Type of thing, right?
Yeah.
He was a great leader. Ed Reed was a great leader, both in the college and in the NFL. And that's what Notre Dame needs right now. I think they have some leaders on the team, but you don't need like anything even that like historic, right? Like everyone knows that speech.
Give me what Alohi Gilman did. Give me Alohi Gilman from a couple years ago. Alohi was a great leader because Alohi would call you on your stuff, but you knew he was going to bring it every day, and he would give you that speech, and it was very similar to the Ed Reed speech. You know, like, hey, I'm hurting, you know what I mean, but I'm not leaving here without a win, and I want to see if they have guys like that on this football team, and Patrick McGrain said also Chip Long will be the offensive coordinator next year. It'll surprise me a little bit. At this point, but they got a big game this weekend against Ole Miss.
They do.
So it's going to be an interesting one. So very interesting one. All right, let's get back to our questions from John A1. If Notre Dame tight ends are working a game plan in which they are stretching the seams, how does that aid the wide receivers? A ton.
Create space.
A ton. I mean, it's harder to defend the perimeter when you've got to defend the seams. I mean, that's a big part of it. It puts linebackers in situations where they have to open and run. Part of the reason Notre Dame's running back pass game hasn't been as effective this year is because linebackers never have to turn their hips. They can just square up the line of scrimmage. You've got to use your receivers to run vertically, and you've got to actually hit some of those throws. And I'll never understand why they just refuse to use Michael Mayer on anything deep beyond a wheel route. Like how you're not having him screaming up the back seam or screaming up the front seam or just doing all types of different things. I'll never understand why he's not working the 15-yard in routes, underneath different, crossers and different things. It's like all option stuff. That's like all they have him do is like option routes. Well, teams are sitting on that now, and they've got to be more creative with how you use it. But how does it help receivers? Okay, we just talked about one. It forces the secondary players to stay worried about the seam, which makes them less able to help on the perimeter. I think it does things where it softens up the linebackers because the linebackers have to protect the intermediate level, right? They're not necessarily defending the deep ball, but they're making sure that, they don't get sucked up and you just bang that real quick seam route right over top of them in front of the safeties. They are basically, it's almost like a pass off to a degree, Ryan, even though when they do run full because, hey, I got to make sure that I cover you to here until I get that help down the field. But if I get sucked up on play action, all of a sudden he's catching it and he's throwing that ball right behind you. And we've seen Notre Dame hit those a couple times. But those are like the quick pop passes. Now they need to kind of push it even more to where they're starting to really get you to turn and run because then that opens up some of the clear routes, the crossers, the overs. You can start running more like angle routes with your backs. There's different things you can do there. And then it makes for the tight end, it then makes your option routes more effective because teams actually have to think that you might run by them. Because right now they're just running with Mayer, like waiting on him to make his move. Like, okay, he's going to break at some point in time. I'm just going to be prepared for it. And it's making it, he's still catching balls because he's a dude, but there's things you can do to help him out, and that's something that we need to see. Ryan, anything to add to that?
The best part of their defense is the second level, right? So as you're threatening down the seams, linebackers are going to work inside out. So they have to work that threat until they pass off, like you said, Brian, right? And that's creating space, John. Like that's what it is, right? You run the seam so that you bring something right underneath there. So you get an easy completion. That's the biggest thing is that you're clearing out space. Even if you're not throwing the ball to the tight end all the time on the seam route, you're still manufacturing space in some way, right? So that's how it helps wide receivers. And then to Brian's point, if you start hitting a couple of those seam balls, then they're going to have to play even more aggressively to stop the seam, which creates even more space. So I said clear vision earlier for Drew Pine. That there's no easier clear vision than getting, just a clear route where it takes the linebacker's eyes, keeps the safety up top, and then you just hit a wide receiver running a drag across the middle or a slant across the middle. Like that's easy money, right? So that's the biggest thing is you're just creating more space for wide receivers. That's what seam balls do.
I want to comment on this because this frustrates me. Brian from New York says smaller quarterbacks can't see the intermediate middle. Sprint out, throwback to tight end has worked, though. Just need to avoid hits in QB. That's not true.
Yeah.
I'm a 6-foot quarterback that played with 6'4", 6'5" offensive linemen in high school. When I'm 7 yards behind you, you're not 6'5" to me. That's how it works. It's throwing lanes. Drew Brees. Why did Drew Brees attack the middle of the field his entire career just by guessing where he thinks guys would be? No, you can see, especially in the shotgun, where the reason height used to matter a lot more is because the NFL used to be a under center league. And under center, height matters. Because for my first 3 steps, if I'm 6 foot, you are 6'5" to me because we're right there. And so now it's like you never turn your back to the side, to the line of scrimmage. You never have to take your eyes off down the field. The line doesn't just stand there right in front of you. They are 7 to 9 yards in front of you. You can see the intermediates. You can. Where height matters now is you can't throw over guys as effectively because you're small. But you're going to see the throwing lanes. This is one of the most often, like, that's what people say that was Ian Book's problem. Ian Book's over 6'1". That was not Ian Book's problem. It was not that he couldn't see it. And if he couldn't see it, it's because he just can't read a defense, not because he physically couldn't see it. So, I mean, again, what Russell Wilson, right? 5'10" and a half, 5'11". Kyler Murray, 5'10". How are they able to throw over the middle of the field? Are they just guessing? No, because they can see through the throwing lanes. And that's just the reality of it. So I understand why people think that. I do understand why people think that, but it's just not really practical in my opinion, for that. All right, we got some more comments here. Quinn Kibler, mailbag question. Do you think Notre Dame is working on a Wildcat package? Also, what would you want that to look like? Man, honestly, Quinn, it's not even on my radar right now, but if Drew Pine gets hurt or struggles, they're going to need to. And this is where you start talking about the Avery Davis injury really hurts. Because Avery was recruited to play quarterback at Notre Dame. If he was healthy, you could say, hey, look, we're going to put him in. We're going to have an RPO package, and we're just going to run read zone and different read stuff all game and run the ball. But, I mean, their depth is a concern right now with Tyler Buckner injured. It is that Tyler, if they lose Drew Pine, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. Or if he just doesn't play well, they're in trouble. So they're going to have to do something like that. Who that is, how that looks, I have no idea.
No idea either.
And I hope that we never have to find out. I pray that we never have to find out. But I'm man enough to admit when I don't know what to do next. And that would be one of those ones where I don't know who that would be. Who can throw it enough to at least keep teams respectable? Chris Tyree would be my first thought. Just run the read stuff with him. But I mean,
can your boy Tobias Merriweather throw the football? Finally get him in the game.
Seriously, throw the quarterback for real. Oh my goodness. DMND13. Hey, it was great meeting you this past weekend, by the way, at the tailgate. Is there any way Iowa scores enough offensive points to cover their spread of 24 against Nevada? Or is this the only way if they score defensive and special teams points? That was the second weirdest spread of the week for me. That was the most weird spread of the week for me.
24?
Yes.
24?
This is a team that scored
24.
No, they've scored 7 in both games, correct?
I think so.
So I think that then they lose to Iowa State like 14-7 or something like that.
I think it was 10-7. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they scored 7 in the opener, 7, but they're going to beat Nevada by 24. Okay. I know Nevada's defense is bad, but I mean, I don't know if it's that bad.
Can I say this, Brian?
The Notre Dame spread was weird too. I didn't see. It was
a little weird. Was it like it was like 10.5, right?
It's up to 11 now.
It's up to 11.
I'm like, Notre Dame's barely averaging that per game right now.
I know. I'll say this, and I put it on Twitter either this morning or yesterday. I didn't say it in this context, but Notre Dame fans, I know offense has been a big struggle in the first 2 games for Notre Dame. If you want to feel a little better about it, though, go look at Iowa's stats on the season. Spencer Petras is completing 45% of his passes. Brian, their leading rusher, last name Williams, I don't even know who he is, 2.8 yards a carry. The leading rusher on the team. It is bad, man. It's bad. Like, it's awful. Their potential All-American tight end, Sam Laporta, has like 10 catches for 60 yards. It's bad, man. It's really, really bad.
Yeah. It's not good. It's not good. Beefeater, ND08, aka Toe Jam. Who is going to click this weekend? Who's going to click first this weekend, Ryan? O-line or D-line?
I hope it's whoever gets the ball first. Right. So if offense is on the field first, I hope it's the offensive line. If it's defense, I hope the defensive line starts. I know that's a really cliche thing to say, but you need both of them to play well. So I think I really am hoping that Notre Dame, just from the first whistle, from the first kickoff, whoever has the football, I'm really hoping that Notre Dame just comes and just like it plays pissed off, man. Like I hope that they come out and they just really kind of reverse the tides a little bit. So whoever has the ball first, that's what I'm going to say. Is it's going to be offense or defense depending on who's on the field. That's my answer.
Brandon Plesner with an interesting. Hey, have Josh Burnham be the quarterback.
Well, that's a good one. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing a little wildcat with Josh Burnham.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like in all seriousness, that's a very interesting thought.
6'4", 230 pounds. Yeah.
Because he can actually throw. It's not going to be pretty, but he can actually throw. He wasn't just a guy you put in there to run.
Dude, I would put him in the goal. I would even put him in the goal line, even if you don't have to get to that point. Like, that'd be interesting, man. It'd be interesting.
Good Lord have mercy. Ugh. All right, here we go. Next question. Also from Beefeater. He goes, I think D-line brings it. Foskey's going to be like a wild beast all game. For me, Ryan, it's just about the matchup. I think the matchup for the D-line is more favorable than the offensive line. I'll say this. If the offensive line clicks first, it's one of two things is happening. One, the defensive line is just underachieving. Or two, the light does go on for the offensive line. A line that we did think was going to be good coming into the season. We did. And we were wrong. Because I didn't think they'd be Joe Moore Award winners in the first 2 weeks, but I did not see them being this bad. I didn't.
Brian, who do you this bad on paper? Who do you think has the clear advantage? Foskey against those offensive tackles, or Jason Adamalola against those guards? That's a close one, man.
I think it's Foskey.
Foskey
because I think the guards are at least real big guys that Jason's got to kind of run around a little bit. You know, it's easier to double team with him with those big guys because their two guards are huge. Their center's not real big, but Hovell's like 330, Driscoll's like 315, 320. You know, he's at least got some weight on him. I think Safasi's going to be in more ISOs on the edge, and those kids are the right tackle, especially. He's just a stiff. He just really tight hips, and I mean stiff. I mean that literally. He's got really tight hips. He just does not transition well. His lateral quickness is not good. His change of direction is not good. It should be a favorable matchup, which means if he doesn't play well, this is going to be incredibly problematic.
Agreed.
Incredibly problematic. Some little advice here for the defense from Notre Dame 2164. D-line and linebackers, quit embracing blocks like you're hugging your grandma. Good advice. Number 2, O-line. Know your assignment to be physical. Don't stop your feet. 2 for 2. Coaches, play Merriweather and Tyree. Nailed it. 3 for 3. I got nothing to add.
If we ever need a guest co-host, we're going to get you on. That's great analysis.
Fantastic. I'm being dead serious.
I am too.
That's exactly what is needed.
I know I have a sarcastic personality sometimes, but yes, I agree with everything you just said, my friend. Everything you just said.
Little recruiting question here, Ryan, from Salty Virginia Peanuts. He says, isn't Tayshawn Lyons visiting this weekend?
Salty, I'm so disappointed, man. If you go on the message board, onto the visitor list, that thing is
front
completely
page
updated.
Of the website also has an article about that.
There is a whole lot of players that are going to be on campus, and Tayshawn Lyons is one of them this week. So obviously we think that things, of course, for people that don't follow recruiting too well, he's out of Tennyson High School in Hayward, California. 6'2", 175-pound wide receiver who just had 303 yards receiving, Brian, on 8 receptions last week, which is just the most nutty stat line that I have seen all weekend. So Notre Dame's been trending pretty well with Tayshawn, and he will be on campus this game against Cal. Yes.
There you go. All right, let's get to our next one. John A1. If you were at a Notre Dame opponent, how would you attack Drew Pine? How do you hope Notre Dame is prepared for it? Well, I don't know if it'll look a lot different than what we've seen so far. Right. Take away the quick game.
Stop the run game and
force them to beat you down the field. I mean, I'm not being flippant, John, at all. I don't think that changes much from what we've seen. Now, I think it's actually a little easier now to stop him with that game plan because you don't have to be worried about him necessarily pulling it and really gashing you at the run the way Tyler did.
Yeah.
But I don't think it changes a whole lot, to be completely honest with you.
I agree with that.
Changes. Yep. All right. Let's get back to some more. John A1 also says, how can the offense complement itself? I mean, look, John, the way it works is everything builds on each other, right? Like everything you're doing, your what you run out of needs to be what you throw out of, and vice versa. Now, there are going to be some things that are more heavier run and some things that are more heavier pass, but teams on first and second down have to feel that no matter how you line up, everything is an option for you. And what's hurt Notre Dame is there's just some stuff, Ryan, where it's like it's pretty obvious kind of what they're about to do. Maybe not specific route combination, but it's a throw here. It's a run here. And so that just makes you a little bit more tendency oriented. And so I think first and foremost is the run and pass game have to complement each other more from a structural standpoint. Just how you line up and the personnel you're putting on the field. That's number one. That you also need to be able to do more things off your run game with your throwing game. Even if it's just RPO. That's a great thing about RPOs now is you don't necessarily have to design play action shots off of all of your run concepts because you have RPOs, but you still do need play action shots because the thing that play action does for you is you're giving the run action, but you're still pass blocking. There's going to be things you're doing to protect the edge. There's things that you're doing, getting a body inside where an RPO is literally if the quarterback holds the ball, dudes are coming, right? I mean, you've got to get rid of the ball because the offensive line's job is not to keep you from getting hit. It's to block for the run. So I think there are, and good RPO coaches know the difference between RPO and play action. You can't just be RPO. You have to also call some play action shots or play action passes. They don't have to always be shots. So I think all those things, that's what I mean by complementary. So like if you're going to throw screens a quick game, have things to protect those things, do some looks where you are doing a double move or you are doing some other things. If, like USC had a great call. Did you see the screen they hit? I think it went for a touchdown. They faked buck sweep left. Mm-hmm. They took both guards and pulled them left. And he pulled it and threw a tunnel screen to the right. So the right side, like the center and the right tackle, like worked out and blocked out. They brought it inside and went. But then you have this side of the line running with the buck sweep. I was like, dude, that's so creative, and it's not super complex. Like, that's creativity right there, But you're complementing that because next time you run buck sweep, the backside linebacker and backside safety are going to be a little less apt for all I know, it could have been an RPO. I mean,
true.
It could have been. But the next time you run that, the middle to backside of the defense is going to be a little less apt to go chasing the buck sweep action next time, right? And those are complementary things. Hey, you can play this counter this way, but we've got something off of it that you're not going to like if you overplay it too much. And Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of that. Notre Dame doesn't have anything to protect the other things that they're doing, and that's the lack of complementary football. That's why I say there's no method to the madness, so to speak, with what they're doing.
I'm so happy that I don't play in this era now, Brian. I would hate playing in this era as a linebacker now with all the misdirection and eye manipulation. Like, it would suck, man. It would not be fun.
Yep. Let's get to the next question from Rye. What is the worst room on the team? Mine is quarterback. We are not even a top 20 quarterback room in the country. I mean, right now with the injury to Tyler Buckner, I think that's accurate. I would say that's the one I'm most concerned about. Yeah.
I can't really think of. I mean, what's the next closest? I don't know. Like, I think it would just be quarterback, right? Like, is there one that's close?
No, not right now. Not with everybody pretty much healthy.
Yeah.
Jay Montalbano, Reese is official on the hot seat, hottest seat in the country. Turn it around, figure it out, perform, or get lost. Thoughts? I mean, again, Jay, that's just not where my head is at. That's number one. I don't view that as being my job to talk about who is or isn't on the hot seat.
Yeah.
That until a coach gets fired, my focus is going to be on, okay, what do you got to do to fix it? What's wrong? What's broken? And what do you got to do to fix it? It's not my call on who is or is not fired. Especially after 2 games and especially after the way that the offense finished last season, I think we need to chill out with this. And this is sort of that toxic thing that I was talking about earlier in the week. I understand the frustration, but when you start talking about a coach being fired and all that, you're not helping. You're not helping anything because recruits see that. We have recruits in this show. We do. I know for a fact we have recruits that watch our show. I know we have parents of recruits that watch our show. I mean, all these Notre Dame fans want these coaches fired. Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, they do. Right. So I don't know what to do about that. But what I'm going to focus on is fixing it. If Tommy Reese can't figure things out, then clearly changes need to be made, whatever that is. Yeah. But that's not really my focus right now because that's not going to happen right now. So my focus is on what do they got to do to get things changed to go beat Cal. That's my focus.
I do agree with the sentiment that you need to turn it around, figure it out, and perform. Absolutely. I'm not ready to get to the or get lost part, right? Like that's
Right.
to Brian's point. Like we don't need to talk about firing or hiring or coaches search or whatever. But like I agree, something needs to get better, and that's not even just from a Tommy Rees perspective. That's like Marcus Freeman, defensive staff, offensive staff. Like right now, you're not playing good football. Everyone needs to figure it out. It needs to be better.
Right. Right. Sam Tyrell, Brian, do you think Freeman is doing too much media, i.e. talking, great in interviews, but at the end of the day, win, loss are the only thing that matters? I'm a Freeman guy, would like to get your thoughts. No, I don't think that's an issue at all. I think when you lose, you start looking at everything and, oh, well, this is the problem, that's the problem. He's not talking any more than any other coach does, and less in some instances. He talks on Monday, Thursday, and the Thursday press conference is like 10 minutes, and then after the game, that's it. The rest of it, and they're not real long press conferences.
And Brian, I mean, was there any pushback during the offseason when he's talking to media and stuff and everyone's falling in love with it? I mean, like
sort of, well, I mean, but in fairness, it is retro. Like, hey, maybe the response is, hey, maybe he shouldn't have done as much of that and been focused more on the team. But the reality is those two things, he's not talking to the media and doing those things and then not focusing on his football team. Right. I mean, that's just not how it goes. Look, he has not gotten this team prepared to win. It's not because he spends too much time with them. And we rarely talk to him, like maybe once or twice a week during fall camp.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have a different coach each day. So we don't talk to him a lot. We don't see him a lot. Only one of his press conferences is really any time consuming. The other one's after a game. What's he going to be doing? Else he's going to be doing after a game. Mm-hmm. So I understand, Sam, when you're not winning everything, you're going to look at everything. And that's an understandable and natural and acceptable reaction to losing games. I'm fine with it. I just don't think that's the issue, right? And because, we saw him doing a lot of things in the offseason of going on different things, but that's what you do. I mean, that's part of recruiting. That's a part of bringing sort of a shine to your program. That's what you're supposed to do as a head coach, especially when you're trying to recruit.
And it's selling the vision and selling the culture and everything too is part of the reason why you had the number one recruiting class for so long.
It's also part of his job. Your job is to be the spokesman for your football team, and your job is to do both effectively well. But you are correct. Winning and losing is the only thing that matters. It's just, again, it's like I always say, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Marcus Freeman's press appearances are not the reason Notre Dame is 0-2. There are other things that he has to be accountable for why they're 0-2. That's not one. That's definitely not one. And if anything, if he stops talking to the media, it's going to look petty. Oh, he can't handle the pressure, so he doesn't talk to the media. That would be a bad look. 99 problems with BK1. If Notre Dame doesn't get a 2023 quarterback recruit, who are some good and realistic transfer targets? Anyone that would be a strong elite quarterback transfer, possibly. Well, there's nobody in the portal right now that I would look at, and everyone in the portal right now was just told by the NCAA they got to be taken out of the portal right now. So, I mean, anyone worth having is still playing somewhere right now.
Right.
So
that would be purely speculating on
no clue, and I don't really want to do that. I will say this, even if they get a 2023 quarterback, Ryan, and I don't know if you and Sean addressed this on Monday, but Tyler's second season-ending injury in 5 years, I don't care how much you have faith in Tyler Buckner, how much I may have faith in Tyler Buckner. You can't say, well, if Tyler gets hurt, don't worry, we'll have Angeli as a redshirt freshman and another freshman ready to step in. CJ Carr reclassifies. That's not the answer for 2023. They're going to need to go to the transfer portal in 2023. Now, do you still give Tyler Buckner a chance to win the starting job? Of course you do. But you need to go out, and I was okay not doing that this year. Next year, I'm not okay with that. You're going to need to go find a grad transfer quarterback, in my opinion. Now, if it's a guy that can start, great. If it's someone who can come off the bench and rescue you if you're not, that's fine too. But you're going to need a Jack Cohn type of player to look at for next year, no question. A guy that has experience, a guy that's been through the battles, a guy that has the ability to go out there and lead your football team. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
I agree.
Zach Martin with a mailbag question. What are the sets and routes UNC is using to get their three tight ends open and productive? Seems like Stace, Mayer, and Raritan could be that too. I want to throw Kane Barong into that conversation too. We don't ever talk about Kane Barong. But Kane Barong's the second strongest offensive tight end on the roster. He's been fully cleared. He's another guy that I would have in this conversation as well.
Yeah.
But why don't you go and take a crack?
So Zach, they're doing things a little bit differently this year. So Phil Longo's offense doesn't usually feature the tight end as much, but they're doing a lot more like 12 personnel, 11 personnel, then like usually you think of like, hey, maybe they're in like 10 personnel where like they have 2 wide receivers on each side. Like he kind of likes to be a balanced offense with like usually is like a 22 personnel. So a 2x2 personnel, I should say. So 2 receivers on each side. This year I've seen, there's multiple tight ends that have been on the field. Nesbitt, and they have a couple other kids that have been, what was it, Brian? Like their second, third, and fifth leading receivers are all tight ends this year or something like that. Like it was a crazy stat in that regard. So what they're doing is it's still the same concepts on the outside. They're a heavy outside vertically oriented team. So like what Sam Howell would do a lot, and just how Phil Longo's offense it kind of works in general, is that they'll kind of look pre-snap of like, where's the safety playing over? Oh, it's single high. I have a one-on-one outside potentially. I'm going to take a vertical shot outside. What they're doing this year is that they're using that still, but they're using it more as like a clear out almost. So you're leaving stuff open over the middle of the field where tight ends have one-on-ones. Maybe you use a 2 tight end set where one's the clear out guy, one comes underneath. So it's still vertically oriented outside. It's just that you're using more tight ends than you did in the past with a lot more 11 and 12 personnel than you have in the past.
Notre Dame lacks talent, but North Carolina can do all that with their tight ends.
Correct.
But it's a talent problem in Notre Dame.
Correct.
Sure. Not a coaching problem, talent problem.
You're not being sarcastic at all, are you?
Incredibly sarcastic. Laying on pretty thick.
Yes.
D-Rock Irish says, prediction in only 1 week. I don't see multiple changes in this Notre Dame team. Very frustrating. Notre Dame 17, Cal 13. That's where I'm at. I'd like to see a lot of changes. Changes can happen. I just need to see it before I can believe it.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see here. Jim Halloran, Brian and Ryan. Why can't the coaches fix the fundamental issues on offense and defense, i.e. not setting the edge, not staying home backside, breaking down and staying on feet while tackling, O-lines, wide receiver basics? I honestly, Jim, I wish I had an answer. I'm not at practice, so I can't tell you. Here's what I know. Whatever they're doing in practice, they're doing it in a way that's not making it conducive to translating to Saturdays. And that ultimately is the most important part of practice. Whatever you're doing structure-wise, tempo, how you're teaching, how you're doing install, how you're handling mistakes on the field, I'm a believer in run it till you get it right. I'd rather know that I have 3 plays that I flat out know we can run it on anybody because we've run it so much in practice than having 75 different things that you don't even know what you're good at. Mm-hmm. Because whatever you think is working in practice is not working in games, and you have to figure out why. So I don't know why they can't do it. I could certainly throw out speculation, but I'm not at practice, so I can't see that. And the people I talk to are like, man, we look good in practice. One of the questions I have is I wonder, this is a fear that I have with the offense especially. This was a big issue under Brian Kelly, and I fear that it's an issue under Tommy Rees. They oftentimes, Ryan, practice for success, meaning the looks that they give themselves on plays is the looks that will work for your concepts.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I don't think that's necessarily the only way you should do that. There's a time and place for that, but I believe there's practices. Like I believe the first day of install should be that. Let's get some confidence going in the stuff we run. But I think as you get to Wednesday and then Thursday, you should start throwing some wrinkles at you that maybe you're not used to seeing, or maybe that don't work for certain calls. So you're forcing your quarterback to go to his check down or his next read or whatever the case may be. You're forcing receivers to have to sight adjust or have to, handle a different look that maybe you're not prepared for on that call. Because your offense is going to look great if everything you're showing them on the cards defensively is calls that are designed for that. You have to think that I'm going to make the right call every single time. Good offensive coordinators know sometimes I'm not going to make a call that's perfect call because I'm going to think on this 2nd and 10 based on all of the tendencies we've studied that this is the potential coverages that we're going to get, and these are the plays that can work against those coverages. But you know what? Sometimes you think you're going to get some sort of quarters, and they end up playing cover 2, and the call you just made doesn't work for that. What do you do? What do you have built into your system that says, okay, when they do this? So like one thing I used to like to do is, I'd have my route combination. So if I'm running double post to the field, I'd have something different backside to say, what can they do to take double posts away? Okay, so if they're going to take something to take away my primary route combination, then my backside route combination needs to be geared towards that. So if they're going to take double post away, then one of the things that the team can do to take double post away is to take that Mike linebacker and run him right under the inside post and take their safety and run them on top of the outside post, underneath the outside post. So what do? A lot of the stuff I'd have built back in it would be taking some kind of backside route and just, taking it to where that linebacker is going to be, right? And then either the linebacker has to stay up on that route, which still leaves me my inside post open, or if that guy's going to undercut the double post, then I now have something replacing that guy that's going to be a come down to that gives me something, right? So that's something that I don't know if they're doing a whole lot of. And if they are they practicing where you have to go back to that read? So I used to love backside high lows from my route combinations, so whatever, drag in, drag post, in, under, some kind of backside high low with a back doing something. And so are you doing things that make your quarterback go back to read that or not in practice? Because if you're practicing to perfection every time, meaning you're giving yourself the call that works well, that's not how games work on Saturdays. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I wonder if that's an issue. We're like, whoa, I wasn't expecting to see this coverage on this against this particular play, and I don't know where to go with the football. That's something that has been an issue in the past. I worry if it's an issue now. And if it is, it needs to get fixed and addressed. And the same thing, with the defense is, show some stuff. I'll tell you, one of the lessons, and I learned this as a young coach. I was at Wittenberg, first year as a coach, fresh out of a player. And we're getting ready to go play Wabash, whose head coach is Chris Creighton, who is now at Eastern Michigan. And our head coach said, he's like, Brian, I want you to just bring the heat today. I was like, okay, well, what's their blitz pack? And he goes, I don't care what they do. I want you to just throw whatever you think can get pressure on the quarterback. So, dude, I'm drawing up all these crazy blitzes and stuff that they're probably not going to see, to the point where coach is like, okay, enough. We've seen enough. But his point was this: if we can handle stuff like that, then we're going to be okay to handle some of the other things, and we're prepared if they throw some stuff at us that we maybe weren't prepared for. And this was like a Thursday practice,
Yep.
I thought that was really insightful.
We used to do the same thing on the high school level, obviously, but like I was mostly a defensive guy, so we would get together. My first or second year, I was coaching defensive line, and the offensive line coach wanted me to do the same thing, Brian. He's like, we're going to practice our protections. It was just an individual. We're practicing our protections, line up in a 4-man fronts with two inside linebackers, and just do whatever you want. Like, just blitz from every spot, send everyone, doesn't matter. Like, just throw the kick and sink at it, basically, and sink or swim time, right? Like, it's making adjustments. You have to have answers to the questions, right? And that, yeah, I agree. That's a you have to think quickly on your feet in those types of situations, right, which I love. And
you need experience at it. You need to know, okay, I saw this. When they give us something we're not prepared for, here's what I know I'm going down to.
Yeah.
And that's where it needs to be. So let's get to some more here. D-Rock Irish. I haven't seen Marcus Freeman or the team emotionally fired up since Marcus Freeman's introduced as the head coach to the team in the locker room. I'm going to disagree with that. I was at the Ohio State game.
Yeah.
That team did not lose that game because they lacked emotional fire. They didn't execute. But that team was emotionally fired up and ready to play that game. That's the only reason they were able to keep Ohio State's potent offense to 21 points, y'all. Like, let's not act like this team's just getting their ass kicked every Saturday. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. That's not what's happening here. Okay, This team is playing bad football, but they did not. They were not emotionally unready to play against Ohio State. They were emotionally unready to play Marshall. Flat out, D-Rock. I'm with you on that. But this is not true. This team has been emotionally fired up several times. They did not respond well to losing to Ohio State. Flat out. Coaching-wise, player-wise, all of it. They didn't. But they were fired up to play the opener. Now we need to find out if the leadership and the coaching of this team can get them back on track emotionally. That's a legitimate concern. But they definitely were emotionally ready to play against Ohio State, which is the big reason why that was a competitive game. And if they weren't if you're not emotionally ready to play Ohio State, or you're not emotionally fired up, you're not going to be competitive against Ohio State. You're going to get blown out. And they didn't. Christopher Crosby says, Brian and Ryan, I see defenses like Clemson swarm to the ball. I don't see that from this defense. Do you think that can be fixed, or is it just not being sure of the scheme? I think those last two things go hand in hand. Yes. Not being sure of the scheme is the fix. Making sure they're sure of the scheme. You can't be a fast flight of the football team if you are not 1,000% certain of, this is what I'm doing. I'm confident in it. Now go play fast.
Very unsure defense right now. It's very unsure. Because, I mean, at the core, talking about Marcus Freeman for a second, at the core, he believes in very aggressive one-gap style defense. And I think that's what they're trying to be. It's just, to Brian's point, I think that they're a lot of unsurety about their assignments, a lot, both on the first and second. I mean, all levels really, but yes, I think that as they become more confident in what they're doing, you're going to play faster, you're going to fill faster, you're going to get downhill faster. Like those things are going to naturally come. I don't think it's a lack of aggressiveness on the defensive side of the football. I think that it is just an unsurety of what you're doing on a snap-to-snap basis.
Mm-hmm. Next question from Christopher Crosby. Brian, I don't think Drew Pine is a bad quarterback. He is, however, inconsistent. As someone who played the position, how do you come out of that? As someone who coached offense, how do you help with that? I think as a quarterback, the biggest thing is just getting into a rhythm. An inconsistent quarterback is often inconsistent when he doesn't feel comfortable with his feet, with his mechanics. So as a coach, that's the biggest thing. Work on the mechanics. Drew's mechanics get him in trouble. I think, like, I'll watch his summer workout clips, and it's fun to watch him doing all this crazy stuff. But I'm like, but that's not what I want to see. I want to see his feet. I don't want to see Drew Pine throwing off these crazy arm angles. I want to see Drew Pine getting his feet set and getting the ball out accurately, right? Because we don't see him do that. He actually throws better off platform than he does sitting in the pocket because that's what he practices in the offseason. So as a coach, get his feet right. That's the biggest thing for me. Get his feet right. His feet get right, and he'll be okay.
Yep.
And so, especially because he doesn't have a great arm. Kids that don't have great arms, especially when their feet get in trouble, is when they, he can't afford to lose steam on a ball, right? So I think that's a big thing. But honestly, as a coach also, it's my job to make sure that early in the game, we are doing a good job of getting him into an early rhythm. I actually think the offensive staff did a pretty good job of that early on against Ohio State. I mean, Tyler Buchner started 8 of 8 for like 128 yards. They allowed him to get into a nice early rhythm offensively to help them build up some confidence. Now, they didn't adjust really well, and there were some mistakes that were made by Tyler, by the line, by the receivers that they didn't finish as well as they started. But you need something similar for Drew. If Drew can come out early and get confident, get rolling early, he'll be okay, right? Mm-hmm. He'll be okay. But if he comes out and he's not moving, not hitting throws, unsure of himself, that's when you start getting in trouble. So I think those are the two biggest things for a quarterback from a coaching standpoint. And then as a quarterback, that mentally helps you with your confidence in what you're trying to do. It helps you with your timing, your rhythm. The biggest thing, too, is he's got to be protected because that's the biggest thing that can get into a quarterback's head. Two things that can get into a quarterback's head more than anything. When you turn the ball over because you threw it at somebody and they didn't catch it, and goes up in the air and like, okay, I don't trust this guy now. I don't want to either throw to that zone again or I don't want to throw to that guy because I'm afraid it's going to go off his hands again and get picked off, right? And then the other one is when you're just constantly getting hit. Getting sacked doesn't bother a quarterback. Getting hit constantly is what can get into your head because it forces you to speed up your internal clock, and then you start rushing things even when the pressure's not coming, and that's how a quarterback get into a funk, excuse me. Sam Tyrell said, Brian, how many series would you like to see Angeli get in this game? I'd like to see Angeli get 4 or 5 series because Notre Dame is winning 38-3 at halftime.
Amen.
But other than that, I'm not concerned about getting Steve Angeli in the game. I'm worried about beating Cal. And if that requires Drew Pine to take every snap, then he takes every snap. If they have some sort of package for Steve Angeli, fine, whatever. At this point in time, I don't even care about that. Just go in the flipping game and get your offense moving. But I hope I hope that Steve Angeli plays this week. I hope he plays next week. I hope he plays against BYU and Syracuse and Stanford and everybody else because Notre Dame wins every game by 30. That's what I hope. Always hope that. Brandon Plensner says, Brian, can RPO still work with Pine at quarterback? Even more so, I would hope. Yeah, because again, RPOs do not require a quarterback to run. They require a quarterback to throw. Now, will the read zone stuff work? The power read stuff work with Drew quarterback? I don't think so. Maybe on like a 3rd and 3, if they collapse the backside, you're calling it because you're collapsing the backside. And if that guy comes screaming off the edge, I'm pulling and I'm throwing. Like if you're in the 3rd and 1, and it's not even really a read per se, like you're not reading the D end. It's just, look, if anyone comes screaming off that edge, pull that sucker and run it outside, right? That's simple as that, right? Corner fire, pull it and run, something like that. Yeah, move the chains, but you're not scaring another team with that. RPOs absolutely need to be a part of the offense of Drew Pine.
I think that there's a misnomer, Brian, that like you have to be this like crazy athlete as a quarterback to be good at RPOs.
Don't get me started on
big misnomer.
And Brandon knows this because we had this huge thing like a year ago where everybody kept talking about you can't run RPOs because Jack Cohn's not mobile. I'm like, you don't understand what an RPO is.
You just need to make
think
quick
RPO
decisions.
is read zone. They have nothing to do with each other.
Yep.
But Brandon knows that.
Quick decision maker and be accurate.
I wonder if Brandon's thought is about the lack of accuracy. I wonder if that's part of it too. Because you do not want an inaccurate thrower throwing RPOs because that's how interceptions happen.
Nope.
Patrick Bird, a true wake up the Echoes game. Let's get out there and compete. Notre Dame 38, Cal 10. If that happens, this is going to be a much more fun post-game show. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a question here from Robert Bishop. Have the white names on the back of the jerseys been discussed yet? I don't know how I feel about it yet. I guess whatever works, go with it. I am a fan of putting names on the back of the jerseys when it's a different situation. Bowl game, alternate uniform, things like that. I have no problem with it then, because as long as the school gives the kids the jerseys, like I know in the past they've had Notre Dame players have had to buy the jerseys from the school, which I think is stupid. I hope that's not the case now, but as long as they get the jersey, I think it's cool. Only in an alternate uniform. I like not having names on the jerseys. That's just me personally. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. It's your personal preference. But I also like the notion of putting them on the jerseys for special occasions.
They look sharp. Looks really sharp, in my opinion, the new jerseys. So
there we go. Beef Eater, Brian, would Drew Pine benefit from bootleg plays? This is the question we talked about earlier. I think getting him out of the pocket is going to be something that he should do. If anything, you're benefiting him, not so much benefiting Drew specifically, like, it helps Drew, although it does. It gives him some easy reads, get the ball in space. But bootlegs help him because it slows down the defense. They can't just come screaming downhill if you're going to hit them with a couple of effective bootlegs. So I think it helps him from how it impacts the defense more so than how it gets him into a rhythm. But I do think some of that early is good. Also, I'm a big believer that unless you have a great pass pro scheme or a great O-line, I don't want the other team always knowing where my quarterback is going to end up. And that's why I like half rolls and bootlegs and sprint outs as just a part of your package. You're not running it all the time, but just something to think about, because I think it makes you say, look, you bring this double inside blitz and we just sprinted outside of it, you're in trouble, right? Because you don't have enough numbers from where we're going. And so, yes, I would move the pocket more. Jonathan Kazmarek says, doesn't help. Our offensive line play has been absolutely awful. They were bad last season, and they are even worse this season. Running game is non-existent. The time for the quarterback to throw isn't there. A lot of what you said is true, except for this part right here. They are even worse this season. They are not worse this season than they were last season.
You should go look back, honestly, Jonathan. Like last year was bad, man. Like it was better at the end of the season than it was, but it was it's bad now. Yeah. It's not that it's
we're not defending what we're saying now. Solid. It's not as bad as it was.
Just last year was bad. Last year was
really bad. Beefeater asks, Brian, how much of a lead would you need to feel comfortable getting Angeli some snaps? Depends on the time of the game. I mean, if you're in the third quarter and you're up 28 or more, I'd put him in. Sure. If you're up 20 in the fourth quarter with 6 minutes left, I'd put him in. It just depends on how the game's going, honestly. And it'll also kind of depend on, is Drew in a rhythm? Because if Drew's still not in a rhythm, I would maybe want to give him another series to try to get him some confidence. Like if you're just winning because you're running it on him and your defense has got a couple scores like Wisconsin, I still kind of like, okay, we need to do something to get Drew going. But if Drew's playing well and you're blowing him out, get him in there as early as you can. Steve's gonna need to play, guys. I mean, look, if his number's called, Ryan, the last thing you want to have happen is the first time he takes a meaningful snap or a snap is like on the road against North Carolina when Drew goes down in the fourth quarter and Steve's got to rally you back from 10 down. Talk about putting a kid in a crap situation, or maybe it's just 3 down and he needs to put a score together. That's an unfair thing to put a kid in. So I want to see him play because look, there's a chance he's going to they're game 3 and they're already to their backup quarterback. You have to make sure Steve Angeli's ready to play in the week of practice and on Saturdays. It's just the whole quick leash thing. That's what I'm against. Yes. What I'm not against is finding out ways to, within the structure of what you're doing, find ways to get Steve Angeli on the field. I'm not opposed to that. Not opposed to that at all. And if, I'm not opposed to that. Mr. Shaughnessy, Pine doesn't need to win the game, just manage. True, but as long as we're speaking the same terms of what managing a game means, because sometimes managing a game is hitting the post route over the top because they're giving it to you. hitting the go route outside. Like, I think sometimes people look at managing games just like I complete 70% of my passes and average 7.1 yards per attempt. And, like what Henry Colombi did the first game of the year, right? Like, he managed it. Okay, completed 90% of his throws and didn't complete a single pass beyond 11 yards. That's not winning you a lot of football games this year. You've got to manage a game is also, look, you want to give me the go route? I'm taking the go route and I'm going to hit it. Manage a game is also, hey, look, you want to give me a one-on-one on this post throw with no safety help? Cool. I'm taking my guy and I'm hitting that throw. That's part of managing a game. Getting the protection protections set is part of managing a game. Getting the run game checks is part of managing a game. And also sometimes managing a game requires you to make a play every now and then. So Mr. Shaughnessy, as long as we're on the same page then yes, I agree with you. He doesn't need to go win a game. He needs to manage a game, but managing a game sometimes means making plays. Archer452 says, quote from Coach Ryan Day, we're Ohio State. It doesn't matter who we're playing. It's about the process. It's about the way that we play. Says Marcus Freeman needs that mentality ingrained at Notre Dame, and you are 1,000% correct. That is one of the biggest cultural changes that needs to happen in Notre Dame, and I've been saying that for a while. It's about the process. And people say, well, results don't matter. Yes, results matter, but are you getting the results because the process of how you're getting there? If you're just out-towning most of the teams in your schedule, then you're not really achieving your maximum success. If you win a game and you're like, I'm not happy about it. Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad we won, but I'm not happy about it because we didn't play our game. And I know that that's not going to help us win the next time we play a team that we can't just out-talent. That's what good. That's what that's why Nick Saban is so cranky after wins that are not good wins, right? Where it's like meaning not good, meaning they didn't play the way that he demands they play. And that's why they so infrequently do lose games, because he's not holding them to the, hey, we won, we got it done. No, if we're good enough to beat a team by 50, then we should flip and beat that team by 50. That's how he looks at it, because it's about the process. Did we play to our standard? Yes, we did. Okay, we won by 3. Great win. Did we play to our standard? Yes, we did, and we won by 20. Not good enough no, we didn't, but we won by 20. Not good enough, because that's a team we should have beat by 40. And that's what I mean by process-driven, not results-driven, from the narrow standpoint of did you win or lose? And that was my issue with Brian Kelly. And you do not see that at the best programs because they're process-oriented, not results-oriented. The results come from the process. Yes. That's what that means.
And if your process is good and consistent, results are going to come more often than not, right? Like that's just It's all intertwined. So I agree completely.
Yep. All right, here we go. Robert Bishop says, I predict Drew Prine is a good enough game to make all of us wonder whether it was beginner's luck or some crazy phenomenon. Viva la Drew, go Irish. I hope you're right. Right. RJG Irving, are Notre Dame players just too well-rounded? School, community, football, media, personal life. Is there enough left for fire? Seems we want to play bully ball without the bullies. Hope I'm wrong. Look, you go talk to the players in the 80s and 90s, and they were doing all of that stuff back in the 80s and 90s, and they still played with fire.
I was about to say. I mean, we're covering one of the historical programs in all of college football. Do we think that this is just unique to this time period, that they just care about school and community and family now? I mean, it's always been this way. It's just your process needs to change a little bit, right, to how you get to those results. But it's not any different than what Aaron Taylor was doing back then. Like, it's not Ricky Waters and all those cats. Like, they're all doing the same thing. It's just the results haven't come recently. So,
yep. Got a comment down here from CMAC. He says, Brian, any news on Tyler Buckner? Some are saying he's had surgery and AC joint wasn't as bad as projected, and others, what's he say? Is there another part of that comment that I'm missing here? I don't see it. But look, I don't speculate on injuries. Here's what Notre Dame has reported. I'm not a doctor. I know football, right? That's what I can speak on really well. I'm not a doctor. And if Notre Dame has not told us that things went better or worse, other people can report on injuries and all that other kind of stuff. Maybe he comes back at some point in time this year. What I know is that the head coach said he's out 4 months. If it's less than that, great. Hope he comes back healthy because he needs the experience. But it's just not. I say it all the time. I don't talk about injuries beyond what we absolutely know. I'm not going to report what somebody told me about this person, that other person said, unless Marcus Freeman or Brian Radigan or whoever else performed that surgery tells me this is what's going on, then I'm just not going to report on it. And there's often way too much. Because remember what was first coming out? 3 to 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, and then bam, 4 months.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just not. And I'm not blaming other people for speaking on that. Everybody gets to choose to run their business however they want. And I'm not faulting them or saying they're wrong and I'm right. I'm just saying this is what I believe and what I think and how we're going to do it. And other people can make whatever decisions they think are best for them with no judgment. It's just different. Everybody chooses to run their business a different way. And this is just how I want to be with injuries, because I just have learned with football as a coach, you never really know. You think something's not a big deal, then you get in there and you do the surgery and you realize, wow, there's something going on that was there already. There's way too much scar tissue here on this kid's knee. We got to clean this up. And now we've just added another month onto his rehab or something like that. Right. And so that's just not my expertise. And I'm just not going to speculate on those kind of things. That's just where we're at. All right. Josh P. said, I forgot who said it, maybe Goolsby or Malik Zaire, but wide receivers running comeback routes on the outside is wild for college as a staple of an offense. That's 50 yards across the field throw. That's hard. I don't know of many teams running far hash comeback routes. So
it's not a staple of the offense.
Yeah. I mean, they run comebacks, but it's to the boundary. And those are, if you can't throw a 15-yard comeback into the boundary or middle of the field, then you're not a very good quarterback.
Yep.
You're just not. Now, the routes suck. That's the problem. And they're not getting any separation. But, I mean, every good team I know runs those. Bama runs those. USC runs those. Oklahoma runs those. Even teams with quarterbacks that don't have great arms will run those. Now, you got to be smart as a coach about where you're calling it. And like if you're on the right hash and you're not calling a far field comeback throw to your number one on a trip side, unless you have Pat Mahomes as your quarterback, and even then, that's a long flip and throw on a stop route. You know what I mean? But boundary wise, you got to be able. It's got to be a staple of your offense. Now, the question is, do you call comebacks or do you have comebacks built in as a side adjust to a bailing corner? That's where we can kind of get into the conversation. I actually would never call a comeback unless it was checked by the quarterback because of what they saw from the coverage. But even then, I want a comeback to be a response to how the defense is playing you. I'm calling a go route or some kind of deep route, and that guy's bailing at the snap, then push to 13 and then break that sucker back, or push to 15 or whatever your depth is and push it back. That's how I would like to call comebacks, Ryan. I don't know if you have an opinion on that or not.
I mean, everybody runs it. It's not a staple of the offense. It's not. I mean, not every route that Notre Dame's running is a comeback. So I just push back against the
Well, he
hyperbole.
didn't say it's every route, but it's a staple of the offense, and I just don't think it's a staple of the offense.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's hyperbolic to say that's like all they run type of thing. Like, nah.
Yeah, so we got some other questions here from Ryan Bush. Ryan says, did Brian give his upset pick yet? So I did not say this earlier. I meant to, but Sean Davis stole my Nebraska upset pick. I was leaning towards going with Nebraska. Just for fun, because our upset picks are kind of for fun. I hadn't decided yet, but he took that away from me, so I had to bust his chops a little bit. For number one, the criteria for our upset picks is an unranked team beats a ranked team, no matter the spread, unless they are favored. That's the only exception, which is why I don't consider me picking Michigan State as an upset, because Michigan State is favored. Washington is favored, I believe, still in that game. At least they were as of a couple days ago. I'm actually going to look now and see if that's yes, they're 3.5-point favorite. So it's technically an upset, but I also picked Auburn to beat Penn State, and I believe Penn State is favored to win that game. So technically that's an upset as well. But Penn State is a 3-point favorite, and Auburn, it's a ranked team. There's a couple other games that I was kind of leaning towards and looking at, Ryan, when it came to upset picks. And I want to run a couple of them by you and just kind of quickly get your thoughts on what you think of those games. Okay. Here was a potential upset pick that I was looking at. Again, upsets are an unranked team beats a ranked team, or an upset of a team that's at least a 6-point underdog or more. Okay. And there was about 3 or 4 of them that I looked at. Number one, Western Kentucky is a 6.5-point underdog at Indiana. Indiana's off to a 2-0 start. I don't think it's been a super impressive 2-0 start. They struggled with Idaho last week. I like Western Kentucky. I like that offense they're running. If they had Bailey Zappi, I'd even be more prone to go with that pick. But what do you think about potentially Western Kentucky being a potential upset team over Indiana, who is a 6.5-point favorite?
I think it's fair. I mean, I like the Austin Reed kid, the quarterback for Western Kentucky. He's just kind of getting things rolling. I would say this, O'Brien, there probably would not be an upset pick if they did have Bailey Zappi because they would
Oh,
probably
yeah,
be
yeah.
favored in this game.
You're
But
right. You're probably right on
yeah,
that.
I don't hate
Probably
that one
right
though.
on that.
That's an interesting one. That's actually one that I did look at. But I ultimately went with a different game. But
Yep.
it's not a bad one. Not a bad one.
I haven't done the upset picks yet, so I haven't looked at your email. Who was your upset pick?
I have Texas Tech over NC State this
Okay.
week.
That was going to be another one I was going to ask you about. That's a very
Mhm.
interesting one.
Yep.
I am very curious to see. Georgia Tech is an interesting team. So they beat Western Carolina last week. They are a 17-point dog at home to Ole Miss. They didn't look great beating Western Carolina. They actually played Clemson really tough. Now, I know the score was 41-10, but that game was a lot more competitive than that. There was a chance in the third quarter where Georgia Tech had a chance to tie the game. They just missed a bunch of opportunities. And Ole Miss has been good so far, but they haven't exactly, like, to me, lit the world on fire in their first two games against Central Arkansas. They did not look good against Troy in the opener.
Yeah. It's like
And
28-10, right? Or
Yes,
something.
28-10. And Troy did score last, but I thought Troy moved the ball relatively well on them in the throwing game. And Jackson Dart's been good, but they've been a little bit conservative with him so far. They've run the ball well so far this year with Zach Evans and Quinshawn Junkins, who you guys remember I graded him as a 4-star recruit. He's looked good in his first two games. Has almost 200 yards rushing in two games.
Yep.
Good back. That's one I looked at as a possibility, Ryan. Here's a couple more that I found very interesting in my opinion. How bad is Colorado right now? That's
awful,
just kind
man.
of a side note.
Awful.
They're so bad.
They just got smoked by TCU, and
Oh
TCU
my
is not very
gosh,
good either.
they're not good. They're a 27.5-point underdog at Minnesota, and I would not put money on Colorado. They are bad.
Just the cover, like
Yeah. Here's a really interesting one that I've been leaning towards all week.
Okay.
Kansas at Houston. Houston is an 8.5-point favorite. I have not been super impressed with Houston so far. I thought their win over UTSA was really good. I'll talk about them there in a second. Losing at Texas Tech, their defense was kind of turning the corner a little bit last year. They've not looked good the first two games this year with Doug Belk. And that is one that I'm like, you look at Kansas, Ryan, and this is going to sound crazy, but Lance Leopold is a good football coach.
He is.
And they have looked – they're beating West Virginia on the road in overtime last week showed me some grit from Kansas that they haven't shown in a long time. And a buddy was like, man, they beat West Virginia by 13 by 13. And I'm like, well, kind of. You know what I mean? Like, it was an overtime game and they ran a pick six back, right? So you won by 13. But still, going on the road, beating West Virginia, first of all, Neil Brown in trouble, right? In trouble.
Yeah.
But Lance Leopold, man, like, you're going to start in Nebraska fans. If you're smart, this is a guy you're going to start paying attention to the rest of this year because this guy can flat out coach. Houston's talented but undisciplined. I'm not sleeping on the Jayhawks this week as an 8.5-point underdog. Ryan, what say you?
That quarterback's having a pretty good start to the year too.
Good
Jalen Daniels.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a run throw guy. They have a decent running back named Devin Neal as well. Things are starting to look up a little bit with Kansas. I'm not here to say that they're going to take a huge step, but they're more competitive so far already than they certainly were last year. So shout out to Lance Leopold in that regard. And I mean, to your point, Brian, like it's not like insurmountable, right?
Yeah.
Like it's possible. It's
Kansas through two games. Kansas has been a more impressive team than Houston. They
100%.
just have.
And Houston's offensive line is pretty bad, man. Like their quarterback's not bad. The Clayton Tune kid's a decent player. They have a couple of receivers, Nathaniel Dell, but the offensive line's not.
He's really good.
The defense hasn't taken
Dell's a really good football player.
Yeah, man. He's small, but he's lightning in a bottle, man. He's lightning in a bottle. Yep.
And Kansas has 5 sacks so far in 2 games. So
they have
a little bit.
Lonnie Phelps, who's a transfer from Miami, Ohio, had 3 sacks, I think, in the first or second game. He looks pretty good. Yeah.
Yep. So that's one. And so my 2 that I'm deciding between are that one. And then here's the next one. Okay. It's going to surprise you because you know what I think about this football team. My last potential upset pick that I'm debating, and I haven't necessarily picked mine yet. Texas San Antonio, 12.5-point dog at Texas.
Oh, man.
No Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Not a big fan of Hudson Card, and then the emotional letdown of losing to Bama, much like we saw from Notre Dame. And with all due respect, UTSA is a better football team than Marshall, in my opinion.
That's fair.
So that is the Kansas game and the UTS game are the two that I got my eye on because they looked really good in beating Army, and I thought they should have beat Houston. If they lost late in the game, 37-35, that's a game I thought they should have won. Their quarterback's putting up some numbers this year for UTSA. Frank Harris is putting up some numbers.
Sure
now,
is.
they're not running the ball real well, and that's what makes me nervous.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hesitation I have because they're not running the ball real effectively. And I don't know if you can beat Texas with just throwing the football. But it's more about the emotional letdown aspect of it than anything. Is Texas going to be mentally ready after preparing all offseason for, let's be honest. Can we all be honest? Texas was not spending fall camp preparing for who they played in the opener. Can we all be honest about that?
Mm-hmm.
Can we be real about that? They did not give two rips about Louisiana Monroe. They preparing for Bama, just like Notre Dame spent the whole offseason preparing for Ohio State. And we saw the emotional letdown Notre Dame had. Can Sark get his team more mentally ready than Marcus Freeman got his team ready for the next week? We'll find out, especially without Hewers playing, because he's out at least, 3-4 weeks is what I think I read.
4 to 6. It could be wrong.
4 to 6.
Yeah.
So that those are the two that I'm leaning towards of all the options I've looked at. There's some potential upset picks this weekend. There are some potential upsets this weekend.
UTSA is a sneaky team, man. You imagine how good they would be if, that running back they had last year, Sincere McCormick.
Mm-hmm.
He left early for the NFL after 3 years, and he didn't get drafted. I'm just like, imagine if he was on that team.
Made dumb decisions like that, dude.
Man. UTSA would be a really good football team if they had a running game along with what Harris is doing at quarterback, because they have a pretty decent defense too. They got some guys on defense that aren't bad. So yeah.
Beat Illinois last year at Illinois. Beat Memphis last year at Memphis.
Yeah.
The Jeff Traylor's doing a nice job there, man. That win at Army last week, that was a good win at Army. Did you see that Army threw for over 300 yards that game?
No. It's the weirdest shock as far as like a schematic change. Have you seen that? Georgia Southern was like a triple option team for a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you know that they now have Kyle Van Treese at quarterback, the Buffalo transfer, and they're throwing for like 400 yards? He threw for 400 yards last week. A Georgia Southern quarterback threw for over 400 yards.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It was wild. Army's quarterback, I think he wasn't the only one that threw a pass in that game, but Cade Ballard went 11 of 15 for 221 yards and a touchdown in that game. And then one of their other quarterbacks, I think it's a quarterback, one of their other quarterbacks came in, Tyler, and went 1 of 2 for 77 yards and a touchdown. And as a team, they went 13 of 18 for 302 yards against UTSA.
Decent yards per attempt. It's decent. It's not bad.
That's not bad. It's not bad at all. So those are the two I'm leaning towards, Ryan. I got to pick one because we're going to put our upset picks out here in a little bit, but those are the two that I'm leaning towards for now.
Some good ones.
Yeah.
Some good ones. It's
going to be a good weekend of college football. Not a lot of sexy games, but just a lot of, we're going to learn something about that team this weekend type of games.
Agreed.
David Flores says, do you like Florida State over Louisville today?
Yes.
I do. Louisville, UCF, I felt kind of choked that game away a little bit last week, if we're being honest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to say it. And there were some questionable officiating calls in that game as well. But,
I liked the Scott Satterfield hire at first, but I'm not as sold anymore on that one. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, and it's hard to build at a place when you've kind of let it be known you want to leave, which he pretty much started doing in like year 2. It's like he hasn't helped himself. Irish Chi-Town, Brian and Ryan, who are the top 3 coaches in college football? I mean, I think for me, it's kind of easy right now. It's Nick Saban, it's Dabo Swinney, and it's Kirby Smart. I mean, look, Kirby's not a great game day coach, but what he's done to build that team is really impressive. Mm-hmm. It really is. I mean,
I can't have much pushback on that right now. Like, that's just.
I mean, Ryan Day's still got a lot.
Who would be fourth?
I mean, you could say, Ryan Day's taking the team to a couple playoff bursts and all that. They beat Clemson a couple years ago. Sure. He's in the he's still got to win a couple more big games for me. To be honest with you,
Kyle Whittingham.
No, not for me. No, I mean, he's a good coach, but like to put him in the top 5, and I'm okay. I don't think it's all about record. I mean, if your program is built to be a 5-7 team and you're constantly winning 8-9 games, you're a great football coach. Eric Parsegian, Lou Emoji loved to talk about this. Eric Parsegian went 500 at Northwestern, and that got him the Notre Dame job because the perception was going 500 at Northwestern was a phenomenal coaching job, right? And I think he was like 4-0 against Notre Dame or something insane like that. I'm okay putting a guy like that on there. I mean, I used to advocate for Gary Patterson and David Shaw and guys like that when they were really rolling and they never won championships and things like that. Mm-hmm. But, Ryan Day still has to prove a little something to me. Lincoln Riley has a lot to prove to me before I can consider him in the conversation. I mean, it's not just about championships, but it's also a level of consistency. Even Georgia's down. They've been 11-2, and he's recruiting well. They play hard. Dude won a championship with Stetson Bennett. That's impressive to me.
Hey, man, that's a NFL draft riser, Stetson Bennett to you.
Lord have mercy on my soul. All right, Tom Frowley. Thank you, Tom. Brian, does it benefit Pine to run tempo with 3-step drops to throw slants and seam routes? Not slants. I do not want Drew Pine throwing a bunch of slants. That route scares the heck out of me with the way he reads defenses. Seams, slides, quick outs, corner routes, stuff like that. Absolutely. No question. No, I'd throw one way you can attack the middle of the field is with crossers and angle routes and stuff like that from your backs. Those are definitely a way that I would go, but you got to attack vertically with your other stuff to clear that out for the backs and the crosser to get there. Those things I'm doing. Tempo, yeah, I do want to see them push the tempo a little bit this week. Is it all you do? No, but should you do it somewhat consistently? Yeah, I would, especially early. I think that's something you can do to get him into a good rhythm. Getting him comfortable and into a rhythm and the offense comfortable in the rhythm is priority number 3 for Tommy Rees. Priority number 1, make Chris Tyree the focal point of the offense. Priority number 2, get flipping Tobias Merriweather on the field. And number 3 is get the offense comfortable and rolling. No question. Last one we're going to have here is from Owen Mullen. He asks if they're going to be a tailgate this weekend. Not really, no. I was not able to get my hands on a parking pass this week in an area where we could do it. So I'm going to be doing a TV spot around 10:45, I think. So I'll be at the stadium pretty early. If you all are doing get-togethers, if there's like a IB meetup somewhere that's like kind of on campus, not one of the lots outside because I really can't get to those, I would love to come and meet y'all and if you guys want to set up something like that, but I just wasn't able to get a pass to get everything rocking and rolling this week. So I do apologize, but I'll be around. I'd love to meet all the people that are coming to this game. Absolutely. So Ryan, that is going to do it for today's show. Mailbag was really long today. We had a lot of great questions, a lot of excellent stuff there today. Enjoyed the predictions. Going to be a fun weekend of college football. Hopefully Notre Dame gets a W this weekend. We will be back tomorrow. Vince and Sean at 10 a.m. tomorrow is starting IB countdown to kickoff. They'll preview the game, give the latest news and analysis, take a look at some of this weekend's games. They're going to give their slant on the games. Then, of course, post-game show. We will have our post-game show to be me, Ryan. I believe Sean Davis and Vince will also both be part of our post-game show. We should have the whole crew back together this week since Ryan is not traveling. Sunday, 7 p.m. on Sunday, we will have our Upon Further Review, and then next week we'll be right back on track. So make sure that you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you're listening via a podcast platform, give us a 5-star review. Sign up for the message boards at irishbreakdown.com. Buy the IB gear. Buy Built Bars. Those are great. We haven't talked about those in a while. Still love Built Bars. All that great stuff. And to Irish One, who just said, thanks for the prayers, IB family. You are definitely in our thoughts and prayers. And if anybody else is feeling that way, you have a community and a group of people here that genuinely do care about each other. And so it's okay to talk to people. If you don't want to talk to us here, if you're struggling with something, there's always groups out there that can help. Don't be afraid to reach out to help. That's one of the biggest things that people that are dealing with struggles or feeling alone or depression or whatever the case may be, there are people out there that want to help you. They just need to know that you need it. So don't be afraid to reach out. Okay. We all need somebody else to lift us up sometimes. Obviously, for me, prayer is a big part of that. But I think God also put us on this planet to interact with each other and to support each other and build each other up. And that is also what I believe is part of his calling. So we will do our best to do that. If you don't feel comfortable with that, reach out to other people in your community that are built for that. There are people that are there to help you to get through tough times. And whatever your time may be, somebody's been through it, and they're going to be able to help speak truth and love and compassion into your life. So definitely reach out for those people. So For Ryan, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.